Hello and welcome to Weeb. Today I'm gonna start a new series. What if Naruto made a duo with Luffy? If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
A single tear trickled down Naruto's cheek as he lay on his back, panting and staring up at the pitch-black sky above him. Three bodies were lying on the ground all around him. Sasuke Uchiha, a friend and former teammate, is one of them. The other two were his triplet sister and brother. In the Valley of the End, he had killed them. Because they refused to accept responsibility for their own actions and directed all of their hatred towards the wrong people. They also wanted to blame Naruto and the village, which had disregarded their brother as a child and worshipped the ground they walked on. In contrast, Naruto was viewed as an outsider in both his village and his own home. His late father had wished for his siblings to be revered and viewed as heroes. Their mother had even abandoned Naruto. She devoted all of her time and effort to the two she thought would be the ones to make their clan's names famous. Naruto gave a dry laugh. He said aloud as he started to slowly raise himself off the ground, "Boy, was she wrong." Within the now open seal inside Naruto, Kurama said, "Take it slowly, Kit. Your new arm is slowly forming and will take about another hour or so. But this arm will appear to look like mine. I'm sorry I couldn't give you another human arm." Naruto looked down at his new arm and said, "Don't worry, Kurama. I know you're going through a lot as well with getting your yin and yang back and making yourself whole once more." He remarked after the fact, "I might have to bandage it, so no one freaks out." Still undecided about letting the boy go back to the village full of idiots, Kurama said, "It will be for the best. Those monkeys will only freak out even more once they see it." Naruto quietly sat up for a while and said, "I know." He had the time he needed to think because no one was approaching. "Hey Kurama," he started talking. Kurama knew something had been bothering the boy for some time, so he asked, "Yeah Kit. What's on your mind?" Two siblings had already fled with the foolish Uchiha before this. As he slowly got to his feet and lowered his forehead protector to the floor, Naruto said, "I want to leave. I want to leave this island and see the world. Screw being Hokage to these people. I want to find a new dream and have some fun. I'm only 16 and I have done so much, and it has always been for the others. To save my brother and sister. To save Sasuke. But now a Euro. I want to live my own life." As he jumped slowly onto the river and started to walk, he said, "This is the end. I will never return to this place. Mom can have another kid and try to rebuild the clan, but I'm done. I'm not going to be her or the others' puppet for when the two golden children are no longer around." He was aware that it benefited the East Blue, possibly with Kurama's assistance. He can go from there by walking to a nearby island. The Valley of the End a few hours later. Tsunade, Kushina, and Kakashi rushed to the location where they sensed the potent chakra. Concerned for her children, Kushina cried, "They have to be alright." Tsunade growled as tears threatened to fall down her cheeks, "I don't give a damn about those other brats. I only hope Naruto is alright." Since he could sense no more chakra emanating from that location, Kakashi remained silent. He feared that they had all perished in the conflict. The three landed in front of the once beautiful valley that once held the statues of the Uchiha clan head and village leader. Only 3 bodies were present, along with an arm resting on a forehead protector. As the pug sniffed the arm and turned to face the silver-haired man, Kushina ran to her 2 kids in tears. As the little pug growled, Pakun remarked, "It belongs to Naruto. He looks at the river, and I smell nothing else." "No!" cried Tsunade, covering her mouth with her hands. She took the forehead protector that was left on the arm and whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks, "I've lost him as well." Having a good time. Sitting on the figurehead of his ship, Luffy looks out to see Zoro sitting directly beneath him, keeping a hawk-like eye on his captain. Luffy looked down at his first mate and said, "Zoro, I see someone standing in the middle of the sea." Zoro looked up at Luffy after opening his eyes. He yawned and slowly stood up to see where his captain was looking, asking, "What are you talking about?" A few hundred feet away, a man with blonde hair appeared in front of them, and his eyes widened. From the nest of crows. As Nami and Sanji emerged from the lounge to investigate, Usopp shouted, "There is a man on the water." As they approached, Luffy said, "Let's help him." A raven-haired boy sat on the ship with the odd goat's head, and the blonde gazed up at it. A man with green hair called out to a man with blonde hair who was standing next to him, "Hey, take the rope ladder." Naruto leapt from his position onto the ship without giving it a second thought. I suppose I was fortunate. He blinked his eyes and grinned at the crew who had kept him from fainting in the middle of the East Blue, thinking, because I'm so trier. His eyes rolled into the back of his head before he could speak, and he fell forward, where Luffy embraced the teenage boy. Luffy told his crew, it gives the impression that he hasn't eaten or slept in a few days. He ordered his crew, saying, Zoro helped me carry him inside, Nami made him a bed, and Sanji made him something to eat for when he wakes up. Inside the mindscape of Naruto, Kurama is preceded by Naruto. He told his brother and best friend, I am grateful for them saving me. Kurama used his tails to drag his kit to him for rest, saying, they are different and the one that caught you is something special. He is strong. As he passed out, Naruto concluded, yeah, I got that feeling as well. Alongside Luffy, Luffy looked at Zoro, who has been by his side ever since the newcomer was brought on board, and said, I wonder if he will be willing to join my crew. I can tell he is pretty strong. As he examined the teenage boy sleeping in the bed that Nami typically uses, Zoro remarked, who knows? But you're not wrong. He is pretty strong. When the boy awakens, Sanji enters the room carrying a tray containing a bowl of broth and some water. He put the tray next to Naruto's head, who had been sleeping for the past day or so, and said, I think this will be best for him now. For I don't know how long he hasn't eaten and anything heavy might make him sick. Luffy gave a nod. Now that he could see the blonde's face had whiskers, he prodded the boy's cheek and said, yeah, I think you're right. Hey, he has whiskers on his face. Naruto started to slowly awaken as Luffy touched his cheek. He informed the ship's captain, you know it's rude to feel someone's face without asking. Luffy smiled at the blonde and said, well, I was cleaning off your face with this wet cloth and I noticed you have whiskers. With a sigh, Naruto slowly gets to his feet and sits down. He looked around and saw the same men with green and blonde hair staring at him. I see, he says to them, hello. The blonde lit a cigarette and said, there is a broth and water for you. For I don't know how long your last meal was. In response, Naruto nodded his head. As the person with raven hair set the tray on his lap, he said to the blonde, thanks. It's been about 2 weeks since I have eaten, and soldier pills are starting to make me sick. The teenager with the raven hair asked, what are soldier pills? Naruto gives him a look. As the bandages were removed from his arm, he remarked, they are pills that keep you full and keep you from eating for a while. But a normal person can only use those pills for a couple days. But I'm not normal. Luffy pulled a face and said, that sucks. The Sanji's eyes glowed with hope as he said, hey, give me one of those pills so I can feed it to him. Naruto laughed, maybe later. I still need to see if I have any and if I am going to need them. For I have no idea who you are and where we are. He stated to them. Luffy smiles. You're on our ship the Going Merry. We're pirates. I'm Monkey D. Luffy and I'm the captain of the Straw Hat Pirates. These two are part of my crew. He was referring to the two individuals. I am Roronoa Zoro, first mate and swordsman of the crew, said Zoro. I am Sanji, the chief of the Straw Hat Pirates, said Sanji. You're pirates? Asks Naruto in disbelief. Yeah, I wanted to be free and the freest man was the former pirate king. So I am going to be the king of all pirates, said Luffy with a grin. With the same smile, he said, we go on adventures and help people along the way if the need arises and if we're able to. As he finished his meal, Naruto said, oh, well, I am Uzumaki Naruto, former shinobi of the Hidden Leaf. I quiet after I won our freaking war and how I left. Everyone thinks I'm dead. With stars in his eyes, Luffy said, cool. Join my crew. Naruto blinked. He said to Luffy, are you sure? Yeah, I think it's cool you're a ninja and it will be fun, and you'll be free as part of my crew, said Luffy. Luffy, a woman's voice called out from the doorway. The girl at the door caught everyone's attention. Yeah Nami, what's wrong? Luffy asks, glancing at the red-haired girl. Nami said, holding a bounty poster in her hands, look at this. It was a close-up of Luffy grinning his well-known D smile and waving at the camera. Well shit, he now has a bounty of 60 million berries for kicking Arlong's ass, laughed Zoro. Luffy exclaimed, oh wow, as he reached out to Nami and took the poster from her. Naruto's gaze enlarges. You have a bloodline, he asks, sounding shocked. Everybody looks at him. Luffy pulled his cheek as though it weren't noteworthy, saying, no, I ate a devil fruit and I'm now a rubber man. As Naruto simply nods his head in ignorance, Kurama remarked, "Kid, in the world outside of the elemental islands, there are fruits known as devil fruits that are like bloodlines. But unlike bloodlines, those who eat these fruit lose the ability to swim." Sanji wasn't happy with this result, so he asked, "So Luffy was the only one to get a bounty?" Zoro grinned and turned to face Sanji, saying, "Well, he did punch that rat bastard. So he must have put a bounty on Luffy to cover his ass." Not pleased that the rat had escaped, Nami growled, "I know we should have stomped that bastard to dust." Luffy waved them away and turned to face Naruto, saying, "Don't worry about him. I'm sure my grandpa will get him." He asks again, "So what do you say? Do you want to join my crew?" Naruto glances at everyone before turning back to Luffy. He said to the hyper boy, "Sure, why not?" Luffy exclaimed, "Yay, I now have a ninja on the crew." He is laughed at by Naruto. He continued to laugh and said, "You remind me of me." Sanji looked at Naruto and said, "As long as you're not a bottomless pit, we'll be fine." Who just hums while turning away from him. "Damn it," he spat out. Naruto looked at the sobbing cook and said, "Hey, don't worry. I can live off of ramen. I have most of my life." Sanji's face was filled with horror as he gazed at him. He asked, unsure if he wanted to know, "What kind of monster only fed you ramen?" Naruto said, unsure of what was wrong, "My mom. She did, however, prepare better meals for his siblings." With fire in his eyes, Sanji declared, "She is a monster and I will make sure you eat better. Even if I do make you ramen, it will be good for you." Someone outside said, "Hey, I see a land." Nami said, "That must be Logatown." She informed everyone, "We will resupply here and head for the Grand Line." To this, they all gave a nod. The 6-person crew docks in Logatown's harbor. Nami glanced at the 5 men in the crew and said, "All right, everyone got their list." Usopp looked at his list and then at Sanji and said, "Yeah, we got them." He said to the blonde, "Looks like we are shopping together." Sanji said, "That's fine. But don't get in my way." He was looking for a bargain, and Usopp was just as skilled as Nami at negotiating lower prices from others. Nami glanced at Naruto, Zoro, and Luffy. She growled at them, saying, "You 3 stick together. I don't need Luffy making trouble while we are here." Zoro held onto Luffy's vest collar and said, "Yeah, we got it." The raven-haired boy was attempting to flee as Nami was giving commands. Looking at his new crewmates, Naruto grinned broadly and said, "I already marked him and if need be, I can summon him back to me at any time. Along with anyone else on the crew." To this, Nami raised an eyebrow. Now wondering when he did it, she asked him, "When did this happen?" Naruto smiled. It was the same smile they saw on Luffy every day. Knowing that the swordsman needed 2 new swords and that he needed to get some weapons himself, he walked past them and dragged Zoro along, saying, "When we all shook hands." Together with Sanji and Usopp, Nami simply stood there in disbelief, staring at their hands and seeing nothing at all. Since they were unsure of how much time they would have if Luffy was still at large, they also departed the ship as soon as possible. A man directed them to a side street, where Naruto, Zoro, and Luffy proceeded. Due to the Marines' constant demand for lower prices and the fact that only one man could handle those snakes and keep his doors open, the only weapons store in town that the Marines and pirates used was shut down. Zoro was curious as to whether the blonde was proficient with a sword and asked, "So Naruto, what type of weapons are you looking for?" Naruto turned to face the man with the green hair beside him. He gave Zoro a smile. "Well, I have my family swords as I took them from my dead siblings as they don't need them in the afterlife. As I was leaving the elemental islands I stopped and picked a sword that was willed to me after the person death. The bastard that had was a pain in my ass. But I got it back and I have it sealed away in a tattoo on my right forearm." He grinned. Zoro gave a head nod. He tells Naruto, who nods to the green-haired swordsman, "We will have to spar once I have 2 new swords." Luffy hung on both of their shoulders and swung back and forth like a child, saying, "This is awesome." Naruto merely grinned. "While we are at it, I think you should pick up a weapon, Luffy. I know a lot of fighters that like to use their hands. But even they had weapons to rely on, for you never know." His captain replied. Luffy gave the blonde a head nod. He grinned and said, "Yeah, I used to use a lead pipe as a kid with my brothers as we used to fight pirates and other bandits growing up." Zoro turned to face his captain, who rarely discusses his past. He asks, "Well, maybe a staff or something." Naruto gave a nod. As they continued to move, he remarked, maybe you're a bladed weapon. I guess we will see once we go there. New World. Coffin-shaped ship lands on a jungle island as several men move out of the jungle with guns pointed at the man. Lower your weapons, said the man as another came walking out of the jungle as he heard movement and went to check it out. The man with black hair pulled back and covered it with a bandana, saying, well, Captain will be happy to see you. The golden-eyed man glances at the crew's shrewd shooter. He said to the other, I figure the slacker would. As well, I have a little business with him. As they moved through the jungle to a sizable clearing in the middle, the man with his hand on his gun said, okay, come along. A man with red hair leaned against a big log under a big umbrella, nursing his hangover from the previous night's party. The man with the golden eyes narrowed them at the man in front of him and said, really now, Shanks? Shanks chuckled. He laughed and said, ah. Come on, Mihawk, come relax and have a drink with me. To this, Mihawk raised an eyebrow. He asks the foolish person with the red hair, don't you have a hangover? Shanks grinned and said, nah, I'll be fine. It's rare for you to come and find me out here in the middle of nowhere. Mihawk approached Shanks, sat down beside him, and gave him a bounty poster while simply rolling his eyes. The poster featured a boy wearing an old straw hat with a red ribbon, raven hair, and a big D smile. After examining the bounty poster, Shanks burst out laughing. He laughed and remarked, well boys, it looks like Anchor has his first bounty. The men assembled to gaze at the poster. Ben laughed as he read it and said, well, Luffy did pretty good for his first bounty. While Shanks took a bottle of sake from Ben and gave Mihawk a glass of red wine they had on hand specifically for him, the others took the poster and chatted among themselves. As Shanks drank his sake, he asked, so what else brought you to my little hideaway? Mihawk glanced at Shanks after taking a sip of his red wine. As one of the few people who knew Shanks' true last name, which he has kept a secret from everyone, he told his friend, while I was in the East Blue, I heard word that there was the Fourth Shinobi War. But all the hidden villages united as one and fought against someone called the Rabbit Goddess and one called Madara Uchiha. But the one who won the war was a boy named Naruto Uzumaki. With a distant smile on his face and a picture of a little blonde baby with whiskers on his face in his cabin with his two siblings, Shanks said, I see. Naruto has gotten strong to win a war on his own. Mihawk gave a head nod. He took another sip of his wine and replied, yes. How is Naruto doing, I wonder? Since his oldest sister had only given him photos of his nephews and niece, he pondered. However, he was always attached to Naruto. The same bond he shared with Luffy. Logatown. As Luffy examined every weapon in the store, Zoro had located his two swords. Zoro asked, so, how much for these two, mister? He smiled and said, they are free. For you are the only person that I have ever seen that those two cursed swords allowed you to touch them. Luffy drew two short swords and laughed. One has a crimson handle with an onyx stone on top, and the other has an ivory handle with a ruby gem on top. He said to the two he was holding, I like these two. They feel right in my hand. The man frowned as he turned to face the boy. With a deep sigh, he asked, what is it with you boys and cursed items? Naruto chuckled. After restocking on kunai, he looked at other weapons to see if there was anything else he could try playing with. We just have that luck. The store owner said, I can tell. For I keep seeing that your eyes keep going over to that chain bow staff. Naruto picked it up and examined it, saying, yeah, I figure our female crewmate could use it. For she has a bow staff and this weighted one would be a good one for her. The proprietor gave this a nod. It is good to know you care about her. He replied. Luffy bounced over to his two crewmates, and Zoro nodded. He said to Zoro and Naruto, I think I want these, and I hope you'll teach me. Zoro simply grinned. He said, sure, it will be fun. He was interested in seeing if Luffy could wield a sword. Naruto merely chuckled. As he recalled his mother telling him he would never be as good as his two siblings, he said, I think Zoro would be the best one to teach you. For I do know Kenjutsu. But he is a true master as I am just not as strong as him. However, he dismissed those recollections. His new life does not include them. Instead of being a shinobi, he was now a pirate. Kurama was enjoying Naruto's new friends and their carefree attitude toward life when he asked, are you going to let that old drunk know you're still alive? Yes, but once we're in the Grand Line, I believe I'll do that. In this manner, I can avoid being pursued. Additionally, I must remove my name from the Toad contract as well, he informed Kurama, and the fox nodded in agreement. Both of them gazed at Naruto, who briefly seemed to be lost in thought. Luffy took his 2 short swords to the shopkeeper to pay, asking, "So, do we need anything else?" Looking at Naruto, he told Luffy, "Kid, I can't charge you for them. Just take them," he said to the blonde. "That's 10,000 berries." Naruto nodded toward the chained, weighted bow staff and his kunai. He grinned and said to his 2 new friends, "Okay guys, let's go look around for Luffy wants to check out that tower." Alongside Nami searched the town and purchased clothes for every member of the crew, knowing their sizes, shoes, and other necessities. She returned them to the ship and stored them. She clapped her hands together and told herself, "Now is time to get what I need for my maps." When Nami returned to town, she wandered around, found a store that she needed, and discovered odd compasses that resembled miniature globes. She said to the man behind the counter, "Hey mister, what are these?" The man raised his head from his book. "That is a log post you need for the Grand Line." He informs her. Nami nods, picks up the log post, selects one she wants, and takes 2. Because of the boys she has to deal with, you never know when you'll need a backup. They would definitely break one of them. She paid the man after taking a few more strolls and gathering the items she would need for mapping. Town Center. Luffy was prevented from ascending the tower by Zoro and Naruto, who had their hands on his collar. Naruto looked around and said, "Something doesn't feel right." Zoro turned to face him. He said, "You have that feeling as well." In response, Naruto nodded his head. Luffy gave them a look. "Yeah, I know what you two are talking about. But I really want to see what Goldie Rogers saw when he was up there." He grumbled. Naruto looked around even more and said, "I know Luffy. But I think it might be best we leave. Something isn't right." Luffy nods his head while pouting once more. As Zoro relaxed and continued to hold on to his captain, he exhaled and said, "Fine. Next time I guess." Naruto followed suit. 2 cloaked figures frown off in the shadows. In a somewhat high-pitched male voice, he told the person next to him, "This isn't good." She scowled at the blonde who was standing with the boy with the raven hair and said, "Well, we can get him in the Grand Line." A man wearing a green cloak grinned in another shadow. "Luffy, we'll get together soon," he thought. At the ship, the crew gathered. Nami looked at the others and said, "I think we should get going. Something feels off." Smoker appeared, glaring at the ship that had escaped, and they all nodded as they boarded the ship and prepared to sail when a strong wind picked up and blew them out of harbor. Smoker turns to his men and growls, "I will get you, Straw Hat Luffy." He growled, "Get me a ship." The Konoha. As her transponder snail began to ring strangely, Kushina sat on her bed in tears. She takes it from her nightstand's top. She responds, wiping the tears from her eyes. "Hello." A voice she hadn't heard in a long time said, "Hey Kushina-chan." Kushina was a little taken aback when she said, "Shanks," because she really didn't want to talk to her brother just yet. On his end of the transponder snail, Shanks laughed. He asks her, "Well, little sister, how are things going back in the village?" Kushina froze. She was unsure of how to explain to her older brother what had transpired over the previous few years. "Kushina," Shanks asked, his voice no longer full of laughter. Euro Shanks. A lot has happened in the past 5 years. Kushina started. Alongside Shanks. "What's going on?" inquired Mihawk as he and his men turned to face the man with the red hair. Since he wasn't sure yet, Shanks shook his head. In a serious tone that was unusual for the man who sat in front of his crew and friends, he tells her, "Kushina, tell me what's going on. You better tell me now or I'll be there in the next few days." After taking a deep breath, Kushina slowly exhaled before telling him the tale of how Naruto's siblings fled with the last Uchiha and then left with Orochimaru. How Naruto carried the fourth war on his own shoulders, brought back Tsunade, and became a student of Jiraiya. However, when she and Kakashi and Tsunade had reached the Valley of the End, the bodies of 2 of my children, the Uchiha, and Naruto's right arm with his forehead protector resting on his hand were discovered by me. However, she informed her brother that there was no sign of his body. Shanks' eyes widened and was shaking at what he had heard from his sister. His little Naruto was Gonya Euro. "I apologize, Shanks. I was always more concerned with Naruto's siblings than with him as a mother. It wasn't until his friends pointed out what had happened that I realized I was doing that. I was awful. I reflected on everything that had happened to him as he grew up." Kushina started crying again and said, "I mostly feed him ramen and ignore him. just focusing on their training and praising them over him and just belittling him. When Shanks heard this, his mouth fell open, and as he regained his composure, he clenched his jaw at how pathetically foolish Cammy was with her son. Kushina, I can't believe you. Overlooking one of your kids. To give two pampered brats a kiss on their fucking ground. You know what, I can't believe you, he growled. Naruto's death is a relief. He snarled. After all the abuse you have given him, he is better off without you in that fucking village. Kushina let out a gasp, but Shanks hung up the snail before she could respond. I am sad that I have lost my nephew, Shanks said, glancing at his men. But I'm not sad in losing those two other spoiled brats, because they've always had rights. For the swords that I desired for Naruto. Tears streamed down his cheek as he vented while they listened to him. Having a good time. As they sailed to Whiskey Point, Naruto turned to face Luffy, who called out to him, Hey Luffy. Miss Wednesday and Mr. Nine were sitting tied up on the ship's deck. Yeah Naruto. Luffy asks his crewmate. He tilts his head to the right and asks. Do any of you possess a transponder snail? Naruto asks, glancing at his captain. Luffy smiles. Yes. He smiles and tells Naruto, Nami has it because I killed the last one. Looking up from the log post on her wrist, Nami tells him, yeah it's in the galley. Naruto smiles at her and enters the galley, saying, thanks. Sanji turns to see who is entering his kitchen. Naruto, what do you need? With a cigarette dangling from his lips, asks Sanji. Naruto said, I'm just looking for the transponder snail. He saw it sitting next to a small red couch in the room's corner. When Sanji saw Luffy and Zoro entering the galley for a drink, he said, oh, okay. What do you two jerks want? He asks the two. Luffy gins and tells the ship chef, Sanji I'm thirsty. As the smiling boy bounces to the table, sits down, and turns to face Naruto, Sanji says to Luffy, fine, sit down, and I'll make you something to drink. After returning with a bottle of sake, Zoro sits down to talk with his captain and the cook. Naruto presses the snail's number. Alongside Mihawk and Shanks. It's unbelievable, my sister. She could have sent Naruto with me if she didn't want him, Shanks growls, clenching his fist with one hand. But do you really think you could have managed a child, red hair? Mihawk asked, glancing at the man seated beside him. No, Shanks sighed. With Naruto and the fights with the other three Yankos, I nearly killed Luffy. He sighed and said, it wouldn't have gone well. You're correct, the boy would have been safer with you, though, based on some of what your sister did tell you. In an attempt to cheer up his friend, Mihawk added, you could have also left him with that Luffy kid. Yes, I could have done that. Shanks grinned and said, he would have been safer growing up with Garp around. Mihawk pales at this, so the brat is related that old goat. He questioned. When his snail started ringing, Shanks nodded his head and sighed, who's calling me now? He answered the phone and said, hello. Uncle Shanks, questioned a young male voice. Shanks blinked several times. Who's this? He inquired. It's me, Naruto, the snail says with a smile. Have you forgotten about me already? He questioned. Naruto, how? You're dead, I was told, said a freaked out Shanks. Having a good time. When Luffy heard a name he recognized, he turned to face Naruto and said, hey, Naruto, are you really talking to red hair Shanks? He asks the boy a question. Naruto looks up from his call with his uncle. Yeah, he tells his captain, no, he's my uncle. I'm not dead, I just faked my death after I lost my arm when my sister cut it off. He told Shanks. Naruto, who's the other person there with you? I'm relieved you're still alive. I'm relieved you escaped your mother in that fucking village. She did, however, mention that you studied under Jiraiya. If you sign the Toad contract you might want to void it, so the old fool doesn't summon you back. Shanks tells his nephew. Oh well, that's about Jiraiya and my Captain Monkey D. Luffy, one of his former pupils killed him. Therefore, they are unable to summon me in reverse. Additionally, the slugs and the monkeys are the only summons to which the toads actually communicate. Tsunade wants to kill Mom, and the third dead old man. Indeed, no one will force me to go back to that hellhole, Naruto said, grinning sadly. Hello, Shanks, yelled Luffy from across the room. Shanks turns to face Ben and Mihawk. Oh no, the world is small, I can see why your mother told me that Tsunade was upset with her. Hello, Luffy, he said, his expression slightly shocked. Alongside Shanks, when Yasop wanders up, he sees Ben and Mihawk, along with his captain, looking shocked. "What's going on, guys?" he asked them. With a laugh, Ben turns to face Yasop and says, "Captain's dead nephew isn't dead, and guess who he is sailing with now?" Yasop gazed at the man in front of him, bewildered. With whom is he now sailing? He didn't know where this was going, so he asked. Ben laughed. He somehow found Luffy and joined his crew. He said, "Whoa, it's good to hear that," Yasop said. They can hear Luffy yelling something and then Naruto say something. Shanks turns to face Yasop and says, smiling, "Your son Usopp joined Luffy's crew as well." With a proud smile on his face, Yasop said, "Well, you tell your nephew to have my son call me sometime and for him to tell me about him and his mom. My son is now a pirate. I wonder if he is a sharpshooter that is like me." He grinned even more as he asked himself. "So, Naruto, what are your plans? Did your deceased siblings give you their swords?" asked Shanks. "Well, to be free and see the world, I'm going to sail with Luffy. I did take the swords from them that Mom gave them." "Why?" A little perplexed by the last part, Naruto asked. "Well, those swords were never intended for those two entitled brats," Shanks scowled. "Since I had selected you to lead the Uzumaki clan prior to my departure from the elemental nations, those were always intended for you. However, it seems that your mother disregarded my requests. I have selected you as my heir to continue our family name and bloodline, Naruto," he informed the blonde. "However, I'm honored, Shanks, but I left the village and pretended to be dead." Naruto remarked, "I basically left it to Mom to do that." "Nope, with her screwing up," Shanks said with a laugh. "It returned to me. But while you're still alive, it comes back to you. However, I won't let your mother know you're still alive until you're ready," he said to Naruto. "Thank you," Naruto said. "I don't need her pursuing me in the Grand Line." "Are you in the Grand Line already?" asked Shanks. "Yes, Luffy wants to rule the Pirate Kingdom. Thus, while doing this, we are also enjoying ourselves," Naruto grinned. Shanks grinned. "I'm glad." He grinned more broadly and said, "Remind Luffy when the time comes, I want my hat back." Naruto laughs and says, "Yes, I will tell him. However, I must leave," Naruto said. "All right, Naruto, I'll see you soon," Shanks remarked. "Yes, bye," said Naruto, and with that there was a click. Shanks relaxed with a smile on his face. "I'm glad he is alive, and he is with Luffy," he told everyone. "That boy is interesting. He's with your nephew." Mihawk took a sip of his red wine and remarked, "This will become remarkably interesting as he has a swordsman that I want to see if he will live up to his promise to his captain." "I see," Shanks says, turning to face his old friend. "All right, then," he grinned and said, "we have to watch out for the Straw Hat Pirates." After that, they arrived at Whiskey Point. With all the odd people living there and the headstones lining the hills behind the village, Zoro started to feel uneasy. Naruto concurred with the swordsman. Kurama opened his red eyes to observe their surroundings and said, "Don't lower your guard. The swordsman has a good sense not to trust these fools like that foolish captain of yours. Yes, there is an unpleasant odor. I smell snakes and sand. Is it crocodiles, instead?" I'm not sure what he was smelling, so I asked Naruto. Kurama remarked, "You're smelling crocodile." He had only noticed that a few times previously, because that creature was rarely found in the elemental islands. Luffy chatted with the amiable people and smiled at them. "They genuinely think I was born yesterday. My crew even thinks I'm that naive as to fall for their ploys. Some drugs have been smuggled into my food. However, my body burns things off so quickly." He sighed mentally, thinking, "It will only last about another 10 minutes and they will slip some more in the next dish they give me." As night fell, Zoro, Nami, and Naruto engaged in a number of drinking games with the town's residents. People were sleeping all around the bar at around 2 in the morning. Zoro opens his eyes slowly and surveys the bar. His silver eyes shine like a wolf on the hunt as the moonlight bounces off them. He gets to his feet slowly as he watches Naruto climb out a window and Nami slip out the door. As he slipped out the bar door with a wolfish grin on his lips, he thought, "Looks like it's time to hunt." As Luffy watches his 3 fellow crew members depart from the bar, he opens his eyes. "Everyone needs to return to the ship. I am aware that Usopp will need some time to recover from the drugs." But when Sanji woke up, he thought, "I don't know how long it will last on Sanji." He got up and hastily gathered up his 3 crewmates, putting them over his shoulder. When Sanji got to his feet by himself, he asked, "What's going on, Captain?" As he hands over Usopp, Luffy gives him a look. His eyes hardened as he said, "It's time to leave. Our welcome has come to an end and they are getting ready to turn on us." Sanji swung Usopp over his shoulder and lit a cigarette. He put the sleeping doctor under his right arm and said, "I'll get the ship ready. Go and find the others." As he left the bar to locate the others, Luffy said, "Thanks." Sanji blew a puff of smoke. As he left the bar and returned to the dock where their ship was waiting for them, he thought to himself, "It appears our captain did taste the drugs in our food and drink. He isn't a moron like we believe him to be, kicking a fool every now and then who thinks they can attack him from behind or the side." A man with white hair and a young woman with blue hair conversed in the shadows. The man with white hair said, "Vivi, you need to leave. It isn't safe for you here anymore." Luffy and Zoro stepped onto this. Zoro's eyes glowed softly in the moonlight, and Luffy was surrounded by a kingly aura that caused the two to freeze and retreat. As Naruto and Nami leaped down between the four, there are multiple explosions heard throughout the town. Gazing at his captain, Naruto smiles. "Hey Captain, I got the information you asked for. It appears Miss Wednesday here is the missing princess from a country that one of the 7 warlords is trying to take over. But she has been found out and there is now a bounty on her head. She is wanted dead or alive, but mostly dead," said Naruto as he put the scroll away. Luffy turns to face the girl with the blue hair. He addressed the girl and the older man standing beside her, saying, "What will it be, princess? We can help you get out of here or you can stay here. For we are leaving as Naruto has set this place up to blow up in the next 5 minutes." She lets out a gasp and covers her mouth with a hand. She asks him, "You are going to destroy this place?" Zoro simply grinned while Luffy cocked his head to the right and asked, "Yes. Why should I allow Crocodile to have his little minions running around freely? I have known about this little group since the East Blue, for they came looking for me back on my home island." He was grinning. Rewind. A number of men approach 15-year-old Luffy as he sits on a pile of trash overlooking Gray Terminal. One of the guys calls out to him, "Hey kid." "Yeah," Luffy asks, glancing over his shoulder at the man in the group of men approaching him. The man in the white duster and black cowboy hat on the right asked, "Do you know where we can find Crimson King?" "It depends. Who's looking for him?" Luffy asked, examining the man as everyone in Gray Terminal paused to hear what was happening. A man wearing a gray duster and a white cowboy hat said, "We have business with him." Luffy got up and picked up his lead pipe, saying, "Well, if you have any business with him, you have to handle all his business with me." Asked the third man wearing a black duster and a gray cowboy hat, "Why would someone like the Crimson King have a punk kid like you handle his business for him?" Luffy smiled. He turned away from the 3 idiots, leapt off the trash, and started to walk away, saying, "For he trust a kid over fools and a kid can never lie to him." He waved them away and went into the forest to see if he could find one of the forest kings for dinner tonight, saying, "Anyway, our business is done here. I know he doesn't want anything to do with you 3. The 3 men exchanged glances before turning back to face the boy. However, he had long since left. An elderly man sitting in front of a fire was called out to by one of them. "Oi, old man." The elderly man glanced at the 3 while he was drinking his coffee. "What?" he inquired, frustrated and irritated. All he wanted to do was sip his coffee and possibly take a nap. The person wearing the gray cowboy hat asked, "Who's that kid?" At them, the elderly man raised an eyebrow. With a hint of irritation, he stated, "That was the Crimson King or Luffy. He lives up in the mountain in that forest with the bandits that live up there." The trio exchanged glances. They said to one another, "That boy is the one we are looking for. Let's go hunting for him and take him back to the boss. For no one can tell the boss no," said the one with black cowboy hat. They nodded their heads and ran off into the forest. The old man that was sitting before them went up in a cloud of smoke, and sitting there was Luffy as he just grinned at them. "Fools, do they really think they can get me to join them so easily?" He just giggled and ran off into the forest, jumping up into the trees. "I should send a clone to allow Dayton no trouble is coming her way and have the guys ready," said Luffy to himself as he made a shadow clone of himself, and the clone nodded to him and vanished in a swirl of leaves. Hint 1. The person wearing the white cowboy hat exclaimed, "That damn brat moves pretty quick." Luffy is sitting in the middle of the clearing as they dash into it, grinning and gazing up at the sky. Never glancing at them. "I told you I wasn't going to join." Asked the gray cowboy hat, "Are you sure about that Crimson King?" He smiles and says, I would only join if I was the boss. But how you all smell of crocodiles. I believe that the warlord Sir Crocodile wouldn't allow me to run the show. Luffy looks at the man out of the corner of his right eye. When the three men heard this, they froze. The three of them asked the same question. How did you know this? With a sly smile on his face, Luffy said, it isn't hard to figure out. As there is only one pirate in the world that uses crocodiles and has them as pets. As well, in the underworld there has been a lot of talk about him making a lot of shadow moves against the world government. Their mouths were hanging open. They informed Luffy, boss could use a second in command, or many be third in command. Luffy simply laughed at this. I don't think Miss All Sunday wouldn't like being replaced. As she is his right-hand woman, and I know Mr. One wouldn't like being replaced either, as he is also close to Mr. Zero. He responded with a chuckle. When the boy told them that it was true, they simply blinked. However, a red-haired woman and a sizable group of men entered the clearing before they could speak. Dayton asks, is there a problem here, Luffy? Luffy turned to face his mother. This nice men want me to join an underground criminal organizations and want me to be a lonely little fish to a much larger fish. He stated. Dayton chuckled. I think no. Garp would be terribly upset with me if I allowed you to go play crime boss. Let alone he is already upset with me about you still wanting to be a pirate. She was staring at the three fools. At this, Luffy chuckles. He looked down at a necklace that she had sent him with a crimson crystal and 2 black gemstones on either side. I know, but it's better than me running off to where my mother is at and doing whatever she has been up to. They had forgotten about the 3 idiots standing there trembling in their boots while the bandits glared at them, growling and licking their blades. How's your mother doing, by the way? Dayton asked. The letter I got 2 weeks ago, she is doing well. She was made a boss or something like that. But I should be getting another letter anytime soon. Luffy, who had been able to communicate with his mother for the previous few years after Garp gave him a letter from her, grinned softly. Hey, don't ignore us, exclaimed the idiot wearing the white cowboy hat. Luffy turned to face him now. Like I told you, I will not be joining the billions or the millions or those bounty hunters you have at the beginning of the Grand Line. So return to your master and tell him to screw himself. He stated this. The white cowboy hat wearing man smiled. Well boy, we can't take no as your answer, and you know too much. As you know who our boss is. That means you have to die now. He replied. Before anyone realized what had happened, however, Luffy reached out with his right arm, and 3 kunai sprang out of it, striking the 3 men in the heart. He sighed. As he approached the bodies and removed the kunai to conceal his weapon, he asked her, Dayton. Do you guys think and can send them back to the warlord Crocodile for me? As the men went to work collecting the bodies and preparing to ship them back to the Grand Line, Dayton said, yeah, you got it, kiddo. Just go and catch dinner for us tonight. Luffy grinned and said, yeah, you got it. A tiny puff of smoke appeared on his shoulder as he left. Flashbacks end. Zoro's eyes hardened, and everyone turned to Luffy. He informed his captain, I was searching for the Crimson King because he had a substantial reward on him. Naruto stared at his captain, his blue eyes hardening. As the Straw Hat Boy turned to face him, he said, Luffy. With his own honey brown eyes hardening, Luffy asked, what is it, Naruto? Naruto wanted to know, so he asked, who's your mother and where is she from? Luffy gave him a smile. He held up his hand to prevent Naruto from asking any questions, saying, my mother is from the elemental nations, but she will remain a mystery until she is ready for the world to know. I will not be telling you the village she is from. But she did make it thought the Great Fourth Shinobi War. But she did get hurt before it. He looked away. Luffy saw more explosions going off and said, let's go. The man standing next to her said, please Princess Vivi, we must make our escape and we can use the destruction of the island as cover for you died in it. Sanji had the ship ready to sail, and Usopp was slowly approaching, so she nodded her head slowly as they started running for the ship. As they all got on the ship, Nami yelled, set sail. As he hurried inside to move the ship out of the port and into the open ocean, Sanji replied, yes Nami Swan. Naruto gave Luffy a look. He asks his captain, so how long have you been training as a shinobi? Luffy cocked his head to the right, seeing his crew watching and listening. He said, since I was 3 years old, my grandfather followed the scrolls my mother sent him to get me started, and a little summons appeared on my 3rd birthday to make sure my chakra network was working and was normal. Because my father isn't from the elemental islands, she wasn't sure I would be able to use chakra like yourself and the others. I almost slipped up when I met Shanks when I was 7. But when I was about to save myself, he got in the way and lost his arm. Luffy's eyes hardened and his hand went to his hat when he felt something moving on his back. Hello, Miss, All Sunday. Or should I say Nico Robin? Miss, All Sunday squinted at the young man with the straw hat and the crimson vest. Robin grinned and said, "Good evening, Crimson King. I am honored that you know who I am." Luffy bowed to her and said, "No, the honor is all mine." With everyone staring at their captain as if he were a noble, he asks her, "What brings you to my humble ship?" "I am here for the spy and for the Crimson King, as for my partner Mr. Zero still would like you to join his little group." Robin replied with a grin. As Luffy's hands moved around, all Robin could see was Zoro, Naruto, Nami, and Usopp staring at her. "Well, as you can tell, Miss Robin, your spy isn't here. As you can tell, it is just my crew. I believe the young woman you were looking for I saw laying on the ground dead from the explosion I had my crew set off," he stated to her. Robin looked around and said, "I see." Her eyes widened in terror as Vivi held her and covered her mouth. But each time, the woman with the raven hair simply walked past her with her cold blue eyes. "How can she not notice me?" she asks herself. Naruto approached Robin after glancing at Luffy, who merely gave him a wink. He smirked as he said, "Well, Miss All Sunday, give your boss a message for me. I shall see him soon and I will give her my answer in person." As she leapt back onto her turtle and disappeared into the sea's shadows, Robin said, "Very well. I look forward to meeting you once more, Monkey D. Luffy." As Luffy approached the wall where his kunai rest, everyone turned to watch him. Knowing that type of kunai, Naruto's eyes narrowed. "Luffy, how didn't she not see Vivi while she was standing right here?" Nami asks her captain as he turns to give her a stern look with his honey brown eyes. "I have ability to something called a genjutsu without using hand signs. All I have to do is lock eyes with someone. I trained for years to do that. I am better than the best genjutsu master from Naruto's village," said Luffy with a grin on his face. Kurama watched the boy who was laughing at how Usopp and Nami were alarmed by Naruto's abilities out of the corner of his left eye and said, "Your captain has many secrets. He pretends to be a fool, but he is one to watch out for. He also has a power that flows out of him. One that I have never felt before." Luffy turned around and walked into the kitchen, looking at Sanji and saying, "I'm hungry." As Usopp hurried into the kitchen to take over for Sanji so the blonde could prepare a snack for their captain, he gave the order, "Food Sanji." Usopp take over for Sanji. Sanji gives Usopp and the others who follow their captain into the kitchen a slightly odd look. He asks, "Did I miss something?" Luffy smiles. He sat down and looked out the window, saying, "Not much. We had an unwanted visitor, and we will be going up against a warlord and we will be returning a princess back to her home country." To the right of Zoro is Luffy, to the left is Nami, and to the right of Zoro is Naruto. A little perplexed, Sanji turns to his friends and fellow crew members. Nami said, "I'll explain later." Sanji simply nods in agreement and resumes preparing food for everyone. "So, Princess, tell us your story," Luffy said, turning to face Vivi. However, a ring might be coming from Luffy's head before Vivi could say anything. Luffy reaches up and takes off his hat, setting it on the table. Naruto observes him as a black tiny snail emerges from the crimson ribbon on the hat after Luffy inserts chakra into the seal. "Hello," Luffy said. "Luffy-chan," a woman asked. However, the fact that she was speaking underwater made her voice sound strange. Luffy grinned at Naruto as he forced chakra through his body, realizing it wasn't a genjutsu. Luffy looked back at the snail, whose eyes widened, but the woman remained silent. "Sorry Naruto, it isn't a genjutsu. It's just how Mom has my snail set up." The woman asks, "Have you left Dawn Island, sweetheart?" Luffy grinned broadly and said, "Yeah Mom. I left over a month ago." He informed her, "I also have a pretty good crew." "Really? I am sorry I didn't call for your birthday. We had to do a lot of rebuilding," said Luffy's mother. Luffy grinned broadly and said, "I understand Mom. But I did your gift. Thanks for the swords and kunai. I love them." She said to him, "I'm glad sweetie. How are your seals holding up?" "They're holding up pretty well. I'm sad your friend passed during all of this. But all the books you sent me are helping. So I am able to handle all my seals on my own Mom. So please don't worry about it. If need be, I think I have 2 or 3 crew members I can train in seals to help me if I need them to," said Luffy. The woman said, "Tell me about your crew sweetie." Luffy smiled at Zoro, who grinned back, and said, "Well, my first crew member is Roronoa Zoro. He is my first maiden swordsman, and his style is the three-sword style. Really, he sounds strong. I'm glad he is someone you can trust to be your first mate." She replied. "Then there is Nami. She is my navigator, and she is a cat burglar. But Mom, it's crazy, she can tell when the weather is going to change and tells us before the storm even appears," said Luffy with a proud tone. "That's good to hear, son. She sounds incredibly talented," she replied. Luffy laughed at Usopp, who was pouting at being called out, and said, "Then there is Usopp, he is our snipper and liar. He tells surprisingly good tall tales, and he is the son of Yasop, one of Red Hair Shank's crew members." She chuckles. She assured her son, "He will definitely keep you entertained." Luffy grinned at Sanji while listening to his captain discuss each of them with his mother. "Then there is Sanji. He is our chef. He makes sure we eat well and kicks my ass if I don't eat my veggies, and no one is allowed to leave the table without eating everything on their plate, for no one wastes food in his kitchen. Oa is a kickboxer. But he never uses his hands. But he does use his hands when he does his hand spin kicks. I'm glad someone is finally getting you to get your veggies. I know your brothers tried, and your grandfather, that old bastard, only thinks meat is a balanced diet." She sighed. Luffy made fun of her. He continued to smile and said, Mom, meat is really good." As Luffy went pale, she smiled and said, "Luffy, don't force me to come and kick your ass. I can be scarier than your grandfather." Amid the laughter of the others, Luffy said sheepishly, "Yes, Mom." She asks him, "So are you going to tell me about your final member of your crew?" "Yeah, our final member for now is Uzumaki Naruto. We meet him in the middle of the East Blue as we were sailing to the Logatown before for heading to the Grand Line. He is a shinobi and can do some pretty cool things," said Luffy with a grin on his face. She laughed at him. "Luffy, silly boy, you have some of the same skill as him. So you do know you can have him help you in some of the skill you are having troubles with," she stated to her son. When Luffy turns to face Naruto, his eyes enlarge, and Naruto looks back at him. He never would have imagined that such a thing could occur. "Yeah, well, when we have some time, I'll ask him. For now we have to help a princess, and I need to see if what I felt from Zoro and Sanji, if they have chakra or now. If they do, Mom, can I call on my summons to help me?" asked Luffy as he gazed at the snail and his mother. Before the woman spoke again, there was a brief period of silence. "Yes, Luffy, you can call for them, and if you need more help, call me and I will send my summons to help you as well," she told him. Knowing that she was going to leave, Luffy said, "Thank you, Mom. I love you." "I love you too, sweetie. I have sent you some more scrolls. They're in your shared cabin waiting for you," she told him. Before hanging up, she told him. As Luffy resealed his snail, everyone's eyes were on him. As Usopp put it, "What the hell just happened?" Luffy raised his head. "Huh?" he inquired. Nami looked at Luffy and asked, "Who are you talking to?" Luffy said, "My mom, duh," as though it were inconsequential. Luffy creates a shadow clone without a seal before anyone can speak. Sanji loses his cancer stick, and Naruto narrows his eyes at him while everyone else's eyes widen. The clone simply nods his head and walks out of the kitchen. Kurama asked, observing Luffy from his open cage, "He must have been trained by someone. But who? I don't know who his mother is, and I have no idea." As he attempted to put everything together, Naruto remarked, "But the kunai he used was from Tenten's store because it has her father's seal on it." Luffy examines the scrolls after the clone brings them back. They contain a scroll containing supplies as well as various element jutsus and fighting styles. "Luffy, what's your element?" Naruto asked, glancing at him. Luffy reddened slightly. He turned away and remarked, "I can use them all. My mom said that was rare the few times she came to check up on me and was shocked to see what I can do. The one that freaked her out the most was the wood style I used on accident when I was attacked by one of the Mountain Kings at the age of 4. He was looking away. Naruto's eyes widened looking at him. His voice was laced with shock as he stated, "There was only one person that could use that jutsu in my village, and that was the first Hokage." Luffy gave a shoulder shrug. "Yeah, I don't know nothing about this Hokage person. But I rarely use my skills anymore. But I will use them if I need to. I used it against Arlong. That bastard pissed me off. He didn't like the Hidden Lotus very much. With my body being rubber, there wasn't any backlash on it." He looked at the scroll in front of him and said, "The Drunken Fist." He looked at Zoro and smiled. As his swordsman gazed at the scroll in his captain's hand, he said, "Hey Zoro, we have to try this one." Zoro grinned and said, "Sounds like fun and we get to drink while we train." Sanji approaches and peers over his captain's shoulder at the scroll. "You know we are going to increase out sake budget," he told the two who looked over at Nami, who just let out a sigh. Nami didn't want to hear it, so she said, "Fine, you too." The idea of Rock Lee, who was an expert at the drunken fist, made Naruto laugh. Luffy laughed and said, "I'm pretty good at the sleeping fist." Everyone's eyes were on him. Usopp asked, "What is that?" "It's fighting while sleeping. I can even eat while sleeping too. It is something I learned while training with my grandpa." Luffy grinned. Everyone thought together, what kind of grandfather does he have? Hokage office at Konoha Hokage Tower. Tsunade bit her thumb while gazing out her office window. He found him, and he is doing well. It pleases me that they are becoming acquainted. So should I give Shanks a call and talk to him? As she reached into her desk and discovered 4 snails, she pondered. When a purple snail with tattoos on its face started ringing, she reached for it and said, "Hello. Love, it's been a long time. When are we going to be together again?" I asked the man who was on the other end. "Do you really want me by your side?" she asked with a gentle smile. She questioned him. "More than before. I saw our son. He has grown so much." The man said, "My love, we have missed you so much." "Well, you know I have been tied back to my home village," Tsunade replied. "However, the boy who returned you was gone. You were no longer held there by anything." The man said, "Your cousin is garbage because she abandoned her son, who was the village hero and saved you when I was too weak to." A tear rolled down her cheek. "Dragon, do you really want to be with your broken wife?" she questioned her spouse. "I never saw my strong beautiful wife broken," he said with a slight smile. "I just saw a beautiful woman that needed a strong husband to take care of her heart when she needed him, and I was a fool who wasn't a man to take care of her," he said, looking up to the sky. At this, Tsunade grinned and remarked, "About time. I am aware. It took me 17 years to get the balls to call you and tell you I need you by my side," said Dragon, looking down at the snail in his hand. "I also need you. You're right. I have been sending our son all of the family scrolls and a copy of the village scroll because I am no longer needed in this abandoned Kami village." As she peered out the window at the village, Tsunade remarked, "He is strong and incredibly talented as a shinobi." "I am aware. I'm going to make sure that everyone knows that he is the Crimson King in the underworld and that he becomes king of all pirates," Dragon said with a smile. "I've heard. He was only 8 years old when he got that name," said Tsunade as she remembered the day he got the name. "I was pleased with him. I saw him claim that name while I was in town, and I also saw him save his brother. Now Sabo is a member of my army," Dragon smiled. "How's his eye?" Tsunade asked. "It recovered nicely. Express gratitude to the young lady you dispatched to look after him," Dragon remarked. "Luffy wouldn't stop crying until he woke up." "Yes, she informed me of this." Tsunade recalled meeting Ace and Sabo and adopting them as her sons, saying, "He loves his brothers and will do anything for them." She sighed and added, "I do need to see those 2 boys as well." "Well, Sabo is docked in the land of waves waiting for you and I'm in the East Blue waiting for him and you," Dragon replied with a grin. "Bastard." Tsunade's eyes enlarge. Dragon laughs and says, "I know, but you love me, my dear wife." "All right, let Sabo know that I will be there in a week." Tsunade grinned and said, "Give these bastards a few days, and I'll tell them who's taking over and I'll run away." With a smile that the snail mirrored, Dragon said, "As you wish, my dear wife." She hung up on him with a click. Tsunade reached for another snail with 3 scars over its right eye. "Hello, how may I help you?" a man's voice said. Tsunade smiled and said, "Tell the brat I want to talk to him, Ben." Ben turned to face Shanks, who turned to face him. "What?" Uncertain of what the devil was happening, he asked. Ben said with a devilish smile, "Yeah, have a call." Shanks gave him a perplexed look and said, "Who's calling me now?" he asked as he reached for the snail. Shanks smiled and said, "Hello, you have the handsome red hair, Shanks." Tsunade smiled and said, "Can it, brat?" "Shit," Shanks said, going pale. Acting like a genin in trouble with his sensei, he said, "I didn't do it." With a smirk, Tsunade informed him, "I heard you met my son." Shanks gives the snail a perplexed look and asks, "Whose son?" Ben and Lucky Roo surrounded him, curious about what was happening, so he asked. Before Shanks speaks, The three men exchange glances and blink. Whose son is Tsunade-sensei? Shanks asks questions. She flashes a big smile. Monkey Sanju D. Luffy, she said. The other end became silent as Shanks' jaw hit the floor and his ale mug toppled over, his eyes widening in surprise. Wondering what this woman had to do with Luffy, Ben turned to face his captain. Captain, he asks. Shanks snapped out of it. You mean you're the mystery wife of one Monkey D. Dragon, he questioned as his huge eyes stayed on the snail before him. Yes, Dragon is my husband. Yes, Luffy is my son, and Ace and Sabo are my adopted sons, Tsunade said, causing Shanks to blush even more because he had previously encountered both boys and found them to be difficult. However, why did you abandon your son for that insane old jerk Garp? Asked Shanks. Tsunade let out a sigh. Danzo almost killed him as an infant and Dragon is too high profile and I needed to stay in the Elemental Islands. So I had to turn to Garp to protect my baby. I had no one. She told him. Jiraiya was a fool and Kushina was acting like a spoiled princess. I couldn't trust my only son with him. Shanks said, I now understand. That's why I left. Danzo tried taking me and Rogers saved me. He said looking away. Tsunade said, I know. I would have had Rogers take my son if he were still alive. However, he had long since left. I had to choose Garp as a result. I did, however, see my son. However, he kept it a secret. I taught him shinobi techniques, and he nearly saved himself when you lost your arm to save him. Once I'm in the new world, she said, come see me for a new arm. You finally figured that out? Asked Shanks. Yes, however, only people with Sanju or Uzumaki ancestry will be able to use it. Anybody else? Tsunade sighed and said, it won't work. So Luffy is my little cousin? Asked Shanks. Yes, he is. Thus, if you come across him, take care of him, Tsunade said, grinning distantly. Yes, I will, Shanks said, he is looking after Naruto for me. Yes, I did hear. When I heard that, I was shocked. Why didn't you tell me brat over the phone? Tsunade said in a voice that was sickly sweet. In an attempt to save himself, Shanks started perspiring and said, I was worried that Kushina was around you. All right, this time, I'll overlook it. Tsunade smiled and said, next time, I'm not going to be easy on you. Shanks said, perspiring and appearing on the verge of fainting, thank you. I must go, brat. Tsunade said, a little bitch is coming to my office. Shanks heard a click and said, all right bye sensei. Shanks caught everyone's attention. What the hell? They inquired. Shanks smiled and said, Anchor is my little cousin that I didn't know I had. He also saved my nephew from death and my bitch of a little sister. So, a party is in order, he said, beaming at everyone. This changes a lot, and I was right about what I thought I saw that day. Luffy is able to use chakra and he held a second chakra as well. What does that mean though? Shanks said, leaning back against the tree he was resting against as everyone cheered. He was lost in his thoughts, trying to figure out what secrets his little anchor held. While putting her snails away, Tsunade heard a knock on her office door and yelled, enter. As Kushina and Kakashi entered, Kushina bowed her head to Tsunade and said, I have come to tell you I have spoken to my brother Shanks and I have brought dishonor to the Uzumaki clan and Shanks is now the rightful clan head once more. Tsunade gave this a nod, saying, I guess this will happen. I was informed long ago by Shanks that Naruto would lead the clan. She glared at Kushina and said, but you disregarded his wishes and made the other child the clan heir. Tsunade smirked at the red-headed person in front of her and said, well, you will just be seen as a branch member like how the Hyuga see their second-born members. Kushina simply nodded her head. Until Shanks has an heir, the clan ends with him. She had already written a document about this earlier that day and was about to tell Shanks, but she decided to talk to her husband and cousin first. Any children you have will never be able to claim to be of the main family or clan heir, she added. Don't worry, Kushina says, opening his eyes in horror. To get Shanks to sign this, I'm sending a slug. Tsunade glared at Kushina and said, it would be best if you signed this now. A slug materialized as Kushina nodded her head, went to the desk, and signed the paperwork. The tiny pink slug said, Princess, please take this to Shanks and have him sign these for me. Tsunade replied. The small pink slug said, as you wish Princess. After 20 minutes, the slug returned with papers and a bottle of rum. Princess, for the news, Shanks sends you a gift, and he plans to consider giving you an heir shortly. If it's okay with you, could you pick up his lovely girlfriend from the East Blue? The little pink slug said, he would owe you a debt. Damn, Brad never changes, Tsunade snarled out. Are you on a trip, Lady Hokage? The two people in front of her asked, looking at her bewildered. Kakashi asked, grinning at the woman. Tsunade turned to face Kakashi and said, this is why I called you a brat here. Hatake Kakashi, tomorrow morning, you will be the 6th Hokage. She threw him the Hokage hat and said, it has been approved by the elders and Shinobi Council. Kakashi's lone eye grew wide. What? Shocked, he asked. I miss my son terribly and my husband is waiting for me. Tsunade turned to face them and said, it's time for me to go. Are you married? They both inquired at once. Tsunade grinned and said, yes, I have been married for 20 years, and my 17-year-old son is having a great time as a pirate. I'm going to retire now, go to hell with my husband, and help my 2 adopted sons and my son whenever I can. I'm waiting to be taken to my husband. She informed them that another person would be shocked to see me. The wave land. As he sat on his ship, waiting for his adopted mother, Sabo remembered Dragon calling him and telling him she would arrive in a few days. He glanced at the setting sun. He pulled out a snail wearing a small orange cowboy hat and thought, I'd better call Ace and tell him I'm picking up Mom. If I don't, he'll freak out. The new world. When Ace hears a ringing coming from his hat, everyone looks at him strangely because they have never heard ringing from him before. Ace is sitting on the Moby Dick, gazing up at the sky. A small blue snail wearing a top hat appears in front of Ace as he removes his cowboy hat and directs chakra into one of the red beads. Hey Sabo, Ace said, causing several of his brother's eyes to pop out of their eyes because they had never seen him do that before. Hi, Ace, with a smile on his face, Sabo said, calling to let you know Mom is finally leaving the EN. When Ace hears this, his eyes enlarge. What? He screamed in a panic. Did Luffy experience any problems? In a panic, Ace asked if their mother was approaching them because he was now worried about their younger brother. No. After much waiting, her husband finally gave her the information she needed. She also wants to see us because she misses us. I assume that Luffy and I will meet in Alabaster. Because, according to my spies, he is sailing that way to fight a warlord and has the long-lost princess of that nation aboard his ship, smirked Sabo. Do we have to cover the cost of the funeral this time? Ace, who was pouting, was asked. No, this time we can give Gramps the bill. Because the warlord is a member of the world government, smirked Sabo. Good, make the old goat pay for it, Ace said with a laugh. We nearly ran out of money on the last one, he informed his brother. Yeah, I heard after we left Luce sent Mr. 03 of his idiots back in a coffin with a note that said Crimson King, Sabo laughed. He told his oldest brother, I suppose Dayton didn't want to buy 3 coffins, shove them all into one, and ship them off like that. Why didn't we think of that? Ace laughed. That would have saved us a great deal of money. He smiled softly and said, but Mom did always send us money to help out what we needed. Yes, she did, and she continues to send up training scrolls. Thus, we are aware that she is constantly considering us, said Sabo, grinning. Yes, I can check to see if Pops will allow me to go there and meet you guys. Will his father be present? Ace asked. I don't know, he may be. He's a busy man, though. He nearly got into trouble while he was in Logatown. Sabo grinned and said, but he has a surprisingly good crew and they kept him out of trouble. I'm glad to hear that. Ace hung up, saying, well, Sabo, I'll see you soon. Whitebeard heard everything and said, have a safe trip my son. Ace said, thanks Pops, as he hurried to his room to prepare to depart. Like I just said, Tsunade said, glancing at the 2 idiots in front of her. The new Hokage Kakashi is you. She got up from her chair and gave them a fierce look before telling him, I'm leaving in the morning. However, Tsunade, lady, why did you pick me? As Kakashi was now on his knees and didn't want to be strapped to a desk, asked him a question. Because I need to rejoin my family and there is nothing keeping me here anymore. Tsunade glared at Kushina, who bowed her head away from her cousin and Hokage, as she looked down at the man who was crying on his knees. Kakashi got up and slowly picked up the hat from the floor, saying, fine. Tsunade turned to face the man with the silver hair. You should also get married and have a puppy. You do require an heir. Because before I had my son, I thought the same as you. He brings me the most joy. My 3 sons. With a distant smile on her lips, she remarked, even Naruto had restored some of the joy I was missing from not seeing my 3 sons. Perhaps he could give it a try. I'll try, he told the chubby Hokage. Kakashi blushes at the thought of marriage, but he did meet a nice girl from the land of waves who was working in the village for the rebuild. Tsunade narrowed her eyes at Kushina and grinned at him, saying, as for you, you should just stop thinking about getting more kids. As she pushed past Kushina and departed her office for the last time, she said to the woman, because we already saw what happened and you failed at it. So are we really leaving? Shizune asked, holding Taunton in her arms as she stood outside the office. She inquired with her mistress. Yes, my husband is waiting and the blue is calling. I also miss my sons, Tsunade remarked, glancing at her longtime friend and pupil. Shikamaru Nara was leaning against the wall, her eye closed as she wished to talk to the Hokage about something. Lady Hokage, she said. Yes, Shikamaru, Tsunade asked, turning to face the girl with the raven hair. She asks the girl in front of her a question. Shikamaru pushed off the wall and stood tall in front of the Hokage, saying, I wish to join you on your travels of the blue. You do know I will never be returning to the N, right? She asked, raising an eyebrow at the girl. A euro, no young woman. A euro, in front of her. She asks the girl a question. Yes, Shikamaru said, nodding her head. I am aware. After my mother gave birth to my younger brother, I can do whatever I want. As the sole heiress, I am no longer constrained by my clan. I know this is selfish, but I have wanted to travel the world since I was a young child. Because Naruto and I were children, she said, averting her gaze. Get packed and say your goodbyes. For we are leaving at nightfall, Tsunade whispered to the girl, grinning softly and leaning in close. Shikamaru nods and disappears in a whirlwind of leaves, her eyes widening. Shizune turns to face her mistress and asks, is that smart? She asked the woman before her. Tsunade waved her friend, student away, saying, it will be fine. Let's go. The wave land. While waiting for his mother to arrive, Sabo sat on his boat and gazed at the small town he had researched and learned about. It's funny when you think about it. Hama Euro, so a kid named Naruto saved this village from a little troll and proved a demon has a heart. He felt a chakra that he hadn't felt in a long time, and he laughed to himself. Sabo, a woman's voice exclaimed. When Sabo saw his mother grinning down at him, his head jerked up. Sabo exclaimed, Mom, as he leapt to his feet and leapt to the dock, where the woman with the blonde hair was waiting for him. Tsunade pulled the young man in front of her into an embrace and said, oh my. You have grown since I've last seen you. As he returned to the bone-crushing embrace, Sabo said, you're as beautiful as ever, Mom. He looked up at her from under his top hat and said, I'm just glad you made it out of that war alive. You should have called. We would have dropped everything for you, Mom. You know Luffy, Ace, and I would have gone to war just for you. Her lips formed a gentle smile. I know, my sweet angel. But I couldn't call. I was knocked out too early on in the war, and by the time I came to, it was too late and you 3 would have never gotten here in time. She said to him while kissing his forehead. When Sabo sees the other 2 women with her, he flushes. He whimpered, Moma Euro. Tsunade laughed at her son's humiliation. She pointed to the girl with raven hair who was staring at the blonde with curly hair who had a burn scar over his right eye and said, Ah, Sabo. You know Shizune already, and this here is Shikamaru Nara. Sabo nodded his head at Shikamaru and grinned at Shizune. Hey sis. Hello Shikamaru. I am Sabo. I am one of only 3 of Mom's troublemaking sons. He grinned. However, Sabo returned his serious gaze to his mother. He glared at Shizune and said, but you sis should have called us. Shizune averted his gaze from the young man. Tsunade put her arms around Sabo again, shielding his face from Shikamaru so the girl wouldn't see it, and said, I couldn't as well, this war was over, tailed beast. His expression changed to one of shock. I see, he muttered to his mother. Now do you know why I was unable to call you? Tsunade whispered back to her son. As she gave her a tight hug, Sabo whispered back, yeah. I understand. With a smirk on her face, Tsunade said, before we leave the East Blue, we have to stop back on your old home to pick up a little barone for an annoying little red-hair brat. She pulled back, placing her arms on Sabo's shoulders. With a sardonic expression, Sabo said, why can't Shanks come and get her himself? He complained. Tsunade gave Sabo a stern look and said, well, we are here, and he is in the New World heading towards your little brother who is going to be fighting a warlord soon. How many times have I told you not to let Luffy get in over his head? She questioned him. Hey, don't blame up, Sabo said, raising his hands in surrender. Before Grandpa signed us up for the Marines, we had to leave him. Ace and I would have been imprisoned for desertion, so we decided to leave at the age of 17, which was better and gave us an advantage over the elderly man, he said, grinning. With a sigh, Tsunade squeezed the bridge of her nose and shook her head, saying, I should have just had you three come with me. Yes, Mom, that might have worked for a while. However, as you are aware, the sea called to the three of us, and we would have fled from you as well and been reported missing ninjas. We're living our lives the way we want to in this way, Sabo said with a smile. You're right, Tsunade sighed once more. Luffy would never have given up on his dream of being king of all pirates. Also, Mom, would you want 3 devil fruit users running around a shinobi village? Sabo asked, grinning. Tsunade turned pale and said, No euro, I wouldn't. You 3 monsters running around with devil fruit powers going wild. Her son simply laughed. You have a DF, wait? Tsunade asked, glancing at her son. No. However, all I wanted to see was your face. Ace and Luffy alone. Sabo grinned broadly and said, I am just a hockey user. Tsunade made a fist and smacked Sabo behind the head as he ascended a few steps, saying, You little shit. With a pout, Sabo rubbed the back of his head and said, Ouch, Mom. Not functioning. Tsunade crossed her arms and said, Only Luffy can pull off those doe eyes on me. As she continued to enter the ship, she noticed a red-haired girl laughing at what was going on. Hello, ma'am. My name is Koala, Koala said, bowing to the woman with the blonde hair. Hello, sweetheart. As the girl's eyes widened, Tsunade smirked and said, My name is Tsunade Sanju Monkey. Koala bowed and said, It's a pleasure to meet you, Tsunade-sama. Koala is simply my mother. You don't have to call her Sama or bow to her, Sabo said as he approached his friend from behind. Koala hissed at him, her eyes narrowing, You need to show respect when it is due. After taking everyone's bags and making his way to the lower deck of his small ship, Sabo waved her away and said, Whatever. I'll put your bags in the cabins below, he said. Unfortunately, once we pick up Makino, you might have to share, he remarked, glancing over his shoulder. Tsunade waved her son away and said, Yeah, brat, that is fine. Tiny garden. As his hat started to ring, Luffy sat on deck and gazed at his crew. He sighed and pulled his head away, focusing chakra into it, and a tiny snail wearing an orange little cowboy hat emerged. Hey Ace. He said, smiling. Hi Lou. From the other side, Ace said, I'm calling to see where you are. Well, it appears that time has forgotten since we destroyed Whiskey Pike and are now on an island. Luffy remarked, glancing at the T-Rex that Zoro had just chopped down, because we have seen a few dinosaurs. You seem to be on Little Garden. You may want to leave after obtaining what you require there. As Ace sailed back to the Grand Line from the New World, he said, because it takes the log pose a year to rest there. Hearing this, Nami's face went white. This isn't good, Sanji, she shouted. Yes, my Nami Swan. He knelt in front of her and called out to Sanji. Nami turned to face Luffy, who simply nodded his head in agreement. You and Zoro go and do some hunting while the rest of us go and gather fruits and veggies and water. Luffy creates a number of sealess shadow clones, grabs baskets, and flees, while Naruto does the same, creating a number of shadow clones even though he isn't as good as Luffy at calling out the jutsu. Luffy, what's that? As Ace heard Naruto call out the jutsu, he asked. Luffy looked down at his snail and said, That is my newest crewmate Naruto Uzumaki. He is a shinobi for the N we found standing in the middle of the East Blue. The tiny snail mimicked Ace's facial expressions and scowled upon hearing this. Just be careful, Luffy. He told his younger brother, Mom has warned us not to put too much trust in people from the EN. I am acquainted with Ace. However, he went through too much bullshit and allowed the N for his family to discard him. Even though I am aware that he is keeping some information from me, I still have faith in him. However, everyone has the same right to their secrets as we do. With a slight smirk on his face, Luffy said, reaching for his stomach. Ace was more concerned than ever and said, Yeah, I know Lou. When I met up with you, I'll be checking your seals. Yes, that's okay. Mom's friend who used to visit me for my seal passed away prior to the start of the EN War, and from what I learned from Naruto, that war was about the tailed beast, Luffy remarked, surveying the forest adjacent to the ship. When Ace heard that, He became silent. That isn't good, Luffy. I guess it was best we never went to visit Mom before your 17th birthday like we once talked about, he said with a slight scowl. Yeah, I guess so. But Ace, call me when you're in the Grand Line and I'll tell you where we are at. For I have a feeling we'll be seeing Sabo and Mom soon, replied Luffy. Ace said, yeah, we'll be seeing them soon. Bye, Lu. He was now concerned that many people would suffer if Luffy's secret was discovered. When Naruto heard about seals again, he turned back to Luffy. Why do they care that he has seals on him? He doesn't ask anyone questions. As Luffy watches Naruto out of the corner of her eye and raises an eyebrow, Kurama said, I don't know, Kit. There is something very odd about your captain. I guess all we can do is wait and see and find out what kind of seals this boy has. Naruto simply nodded his head. I think he might be catching on to me if that other chakra I am feeling in him is what I think it is, thought Luffy as he resealed his snail and let out a sigh as he thought about calling Sabo to find out where he was. With that thought he unseals Sabo's snail and calls up his brother. Luffy looks down at his snail as it rings. Alongside Sabo. Grinning, Sabo removes his top hat. It looks like Lu is calling. He called out as Tsunade looked up from her cards as she was sitting on deck across from her son. As she assisted Makino into the ship, Koala glanced at Sabo and said, well, answer it. Hey little brother, said Sabo with a grin. Hey Sabo, where are you at? Asked Luffy as he wanted to know. Oh, nowhere, just picking up Shanks's girlfriend, for the lazy ass couldn't come himself always to the East Blue to pick up Makino himself, said Sabo with a grin as Makino blushed looking over at Sabo who grinned at her. As he briefly lost focus on his brother picking up Makino, Luffy asked, so you already have Mom? Yeah, I have Mom, Sis and another girl that tagged along with them, said Sabo. Luffy smiled and said, who's the girl, and tell Makino hi for me and I can't wait to see her. Hi Luffy, called Makino as sat down with Shizune as she joined the card game. Sabo said, her name is Shikamaru Nara. As he tumbled from the upper railing onto the lower deck, Naruto exclaimed, shit. Luffy simply raised an eyebrow at his new crewmate. Luffy asked, are you alright Naruto? Nami watched Naruto from above. She laughed at him and remarked, I thought you were graceful than that. Naruto blushed and said, shut up. Shikamaru narrowed her eyes at the snail in Sabo's hands and said, he is alive. With a smile, Sabo said, well, it appears that your crew member is having difficulties. Luffy looked at Naruto and asked, did you ran out on your girlfriend or something? Naruto looked away and said, no a euro, it isn't like that. Shika is my best friend and I didn't tell no one when I left the village. Luffy smiled and said, I see. With his eyes fixed on Naruto, Luffy said, well Mom. You know he is alive and well. So are you going to be kicking his ass like you have told me you've done in the past? Since he is aware of only one woman who could whip his ass and get away with it, Naruto's eyes enlarge. I don't know Luffy-chan. I have my baby boy to deal with when I see him. Tsunade replied. Luffy smiled again and said, Mom. I have been good. I'm just kicking a warlord's ass. That's all in euro. Hey Mom, I got to go. One of my clones just met Mr. 3 and Miss Golden Week, said Luffy. There was a click, and Tsunade said, okay sweetie. We'll call once we are in the Grand Line. Alongside Luffy, Luffy stood up and said, we got to move. They are going to make trouble for the giants living on this island. As they leapt from the ship, Naruto nodded his head, leaving Nami and Usopp to defend the ship by themselves. The giants and the two Broken Works agents were being pursued by Luffy and Naruto. Naruto turned to face his recently appointed captain. As they both leapt over a T-Rex that attempted to bite them, Naruto called out, hey Luffy. Luffy tilted his head to the right and asked, yeah Naruto. As they entered a clearing and saw a strange spinning candle cake with a pumpkin on top of it. The bodies of the two giants were gradually covered in wax. As he leapt to avoid the snot bomb, Naruto asked, is Tsunade Ba-chan your mother? Luffy laughed. He pulled out a kunai to block the snot bomb that was headed his way and asked, yeah, that's my mom. Why? Alongside Tsunade and the others. The seal on Tsunade's wrist began to ring as she sat on the ship's rail. Purr. Tsunade scowled at the seal before opening the tiny den. Her voice was irritated as she said, hello. Kakashi said, hello Tsunade-sama. She wasn't in the mood for this little baby calling her, so Tsunade growled, what do you need brat? I am retired. With concern in his voice, Kakashi said, I'm only calling as you are the closest to what just happened. Tsunade's forehead fluttered. Now that Sabo was standing beside his mother and he could hear her speaking to someone, she asked, what do you mean that I am the closest to what happened? The snail's face was marred by a frown as Kakashi said, Ino was on a mission in the land of Wava Euro. While there she was kidnapped by some Piratessa Euro. No one can get to her in time to save Hera Euro. With a checkmark on her forehead, Tsunade asks, do you even know who took the girl? According to Kakashi, Black Cat Pirates. Sabo scowled. He looked at his mother and remarked, I thought Luffy took that crew down for good. Tsunade scowled in response. With a tone of irritation, she declared, we'll find her and take care of those bastards for good. Thank you Tsunade-sama. Kakashi grinned broadly. But Kakashi brat, I will not be returning Ino right away. I'll have to send her back though a slug or something. For we have an appointment to keep. Tsunade grumbled. Kakashi, unsure of how to respond to his former Hokage, said, oh, I'll put her on a vacation until she is ready to return. Smirking, Tsunade hung up on the idiot because she didn't want to deal with him. Tiny Garden. Luffy opened both of his short swords. A sinister smile appeared on his face. Luffy heard a dark voice ask, you ready to teach these fools a lesson, cub? The two short swords in his hands are surrounded by blue and black chakra. As Luffy sliced the snot bomb that was headed his way, he asked, who's next? Mr. Five smiled. He was about to finish when Luffy appeared behind him, slashing the man's bare back. Nice little trick, little boy. But you don't a euro. Blood trickled down Mr. Five's parted lips as he collapsed to the ground. Miss. The eyes widen on Valentine's Day. She gasped and leapt into the air, saying, no a euro. She started to float in the air and called out, 1 kilogram. Luffy smiled. Swords disappeared in the seals on his wrist and he started going through the hand signals, saying, you can't get away from me, miss. Valentine's Day. As the woman with the blonde hair was being cut down by wind blades, Luffy called out, wind blade jutsu. The woman's side was cut as she fell to the ground. Her entire body was covered in shallow cuts. Luffy approached her slowly. I'm sorry, miss, you'll live, but just run away and hide from your boss. He will be going down soon. He said to Miss. She opened her eyes and looked up at him on Valentine's Day. With tears in the corner of her eyes, she uttered, where would I go? I have no one or anywhere to go. With a gentle smile on his face, Luffy knelt beside her. He extended his hand to her and said, well, you could always join my crew. As he leapt to avoid Mr. Three's attack, Naruto caught a glimpse of what was happening. Miss Golden Week took a step back, her eyes filled with fear. She was unsure of how to respond to the attacks of these two peculiar pirates. The strange raven-haired boy had attacked her with water, breaking all of her paint spells on everyone in their vicinity, and she had lost them. Miss Valentine's Day gazed into the gentle eyes that had once been dark and combat-ready. She informed him, I'll only join if you take the girl as well. Luffy smiled. He got up and approached the terrified young girl, saying, sure. He said to Miss, hey, Golden Week. Miss Golden Week said, hi. Luffy asked with a kind and gentle smile, would you like to join my crew along with Miss Valentine's Day? Mr. 3 is knocked unconscious when Naruto descends from the sky with an axe kick. As he told himself, well, that is done. Kurama asked, gazing out of his open cage, Kit, did you feel that dark energy that came from your captain? No, I didn't, Naruto said, his tone irritated. We'll have to find out what the hell is going on with your captain. Even if we have to ask the old hag to see if she will open up about what's sealed within him. Kurama replied. Pirates of Black Cat. Kuro gives the girl with the blonde hair in front of him a sly smile. As he watches Ino struggle while chained to a wall, he remarked, you will get me a nice little price at one of the slave markets. One of the random pirates on his crew asks, Captain, can we play with her? If anyone touches her, it will be me. But if she is a virgin, she will get me a better price in market. Kuro's eyes flashed darkly as he gave the man the backhand. He addressed the bleeding fool on the ground. Ino gives him a glare. She yells at the man, you will not touch me. Kuro grinned sickeningly and said, ha ha ha, euro. Don't worry, my dear, you will only be sold. I will not touch you. Choji took a boat from one of the fishermen, ignoring the others. His normally happy black eyes are as cold as ice as he glares at Sakura and Hinata, growling, I don't give a damn. I am going to save my sister. Hinata turned her gaze away from the big man and said, "You just be careful out there, Choji." As he embarks on the motorboat chase after the pirate ship that had abducted the girl he has come to regard as his sister, Choji declares, "I will Hinata." Sakura made a fist and said, "Let's hurry back to the village and let Hokage-sama know that Choji has gone after Ino." They then fled for the village. The ship of Black Cat. Choji has finally arrived at the ship where Ino was abducted as the sun has set. However, another small ship approaches them not too far away. However, an odd fog slowly creeps in over the ocean. A man from the crow's nest called out, "Captain." A thick fog is rolling in across the sea. Kuro exits his cabin and gazes out over the sea, which was only a few minutes ago clear. By sheer terror, he commands his remaining men to light the lanterns and get several others on watch. "I, Captain," summons every man on deck to light the lanterns. Choji growls, "Shit." He ducks down quickly, feeling the chakra in the mist that now envelops the ship. How am I going to accomplish this now? As he hears a scream from the other side of the deck, he starts to question himself. The men's screams were, "Ah." Peeking over the railing, Choji sees Lady Tsunade and a guy with an odd blonde hairstyle. Leaping onto the deck, he joined the battle. Choji exclaims, "Partial expiation jutsu hands," as his hands enlarge to the size of giant hands and crush the 10 surviving pirates to the ground. The man standing on the upper deck of his pirate ship is the target of his icy black eyes. The man is growled at by him. "Where is Ino?" Kuro grins. He laughs at the crowd, saying, "She is my prize, and I shall be selling her. There is nothing you can do to stop me." Tsunade hardens her honey brown eyes. As the blonde man in the dark blue top hat downs, she tells him, "I don't think you're going to be doing that. If my 17-year-old son could stop you from killing an heiress and murdering innocent villagers, I believe my son here wouldn't have any trouble throwing a lame cat into the drink with his neck broken." Sabo grinned broadly and said, "You honor me, Mom. But unlike Luffy and Ace, I do not have a devil fruit. But I am the strongest in the Revolutionary Army." When Kuro hears Luffy's name and learns that the woman in front of him is the little bastard's mother and that the blonde man beside her is his brother, Kuro goes pale. Sabo leaps up onto the upper deck before Kuro realizes what has happened. Calling out, he pulls his right hand back. "Dragon's Claw," Haki said as armament. Drawing back the man's still beating heart, he drives his hand into his chest, turning it black. His black eyes turn pale and sickly gray as he collapses to the ground, and Kuro's eyes widen. The eyes of the remaining pirates widen in fear and shock. One of the men at random raised his voice. His voice was tremulous as he said, "She is in the captain's room. Just go through that door." Using his left hand, Sabo removes a handkerchief and uses it to wipe his right hand. He grinned and said, "Well, Mom, we now know where Ino is at." Tsunade follows her, and when she reaches the doorway, she spins on her heel. Shikamaru rolls her eyes as she rushes up the stairs because she doesn't want anyone to see the girl if something bad has happened to her. With her honey brown eyes glaring at everyone, Tsunade growls, "You boys will stay out here and wait." As they open the door to Kuro's room, they see the blonde glaring at them and Ino chained to a wall. However, her gaze softens. With a smile on her face, Ino said, "I'm so glad to see you. Yeah, I know we took our damn sweet time in saving your Royal Highness," said Shika with a grin on her face. "Knit brats, let's get these chains off of her and let me check you over," said Tsunade with a smirk on her lips. As Shika assists her friend to the newly made bed, she unchains Ino. Looking up, Ino sees Tsunade. "Don't worry, he didn't rape me, but I am no virgin. But I allowed him to believe I was one so he wouldn't touch me. For he said he would make a killing in sealing me as an untouched slave." She tells the two women who were with she's in. Shika opens her eyes wide. "Whoa, Euro," she asks. Ino looks away, blushing. She moved her hand over her stomach and said, "It was with Naruto before he ran off to fight his siblings and that bastard." Tsunade examines her. She asks, "You're pregnant with his child?" Ino gets red. Tears were streaming down her cheeks as she said, "Yes. I will not be giving up the child for nothing, as this child is the last thing I have left of Naruto." Looking into her sister's eyes, Shika asks, "Does anyone else know?" Ino strokes her cheek with her right hand. She looked up as Choji opened the door and walked into the room, saying, "Yes, Choji. I told him when I found out before we left on this mission." "Anoa Euro," Choji said quietly. He approaches his best friend and sister. Laughing teasingly, Ino said, I am fine Choji, and I knew you wouldn't listen to Lady Tsunade. With a pout, Tsunade said, you got lucky brat. Shika turns to face Tsunade. She asked the blonde earlier, are you going to tell her who we will be meeting up with? Ino and Choji exchange glances with the former Hokage. The woman asks, what is Shika talking about Lady Tsunade? Tsunade exhaled deeply, we are heading to Alabaster to meet up with my son and his crew. She informed them. Who's your son? Choji asks, attempting to ascertain the direction of this. My son is Monkey Senji D. Luffy, but there is one crew member on his crew that would have Ino wanting to join us on our trip. Tsunade continued with a sigh. With big, beseeching eyes, Ino asked her, who would that be? As Ino collapsed in Shika's arms, Tsunade declared, Naruto is alive and part of my son's crew. Tiny garden. A crimson sword is being held in Luffy's right hand. He smirks as he asks, what would it be Mr. 3? You're live for theirs. Mr. 3 is covered in burns and cuts. Fine, said Mr. 3 as his wax pumpkin stops spinning and the wax begins to fade away from the bodies of the two giants. With a golden aura surrounding him and his honey brown eyes flashing golden, Luffy said, leave before I change my mind. Mr. 3 sobs as he flees for his life. Yes, sir. Naruto turns his attention to his captain. He asked, Luffy, what was that? Luffy turns to face him and gives him a wink while putting a finger to his lips. He informs the shinobi in front of him, it's a mystery for now. His antics cause Kurama and Naruto to collapse. Besides Naruto, you have your secret as well. Once you feel comfortable to tell us, I shall share mine with you and crew, said Luffy as he spins on his heel walking over to Miss. Happy Valentine's Day, Miss. Golden Week. As he bows and extends his hand to help them off the ground, he asks, are you coming ladies? With their kills, they encounter Zoro and Sanji as they make their way to the ship. A number of dead dinosaurs are lying in front of the ship as they approach it. Luffy blows a soft whistle. He told his chef and vice president, you two went all out. Nami sighs and scratches at a purple stain that is starting to appear on her stomach. Vivi notices the mark on her friend's abdomen. With concern in her voice, she asks, are you okay Nami? Nami smiles as she looks up at her. Yeah, I am fine, I just need get some of the fresh aloe and put it on it and I should be fine. She says to her companion. Now that everyone is staring at him and the girl and young woman behind him, Luffy calls out, well people, we have 2 new crew members. Zoro looked them over and said, all right. He tells the two, grinning, I will tell you this once. Betray our captain and you shall answer to my swords. As he starts chopping the meat for Sanji, he says, welcome to the crew. Sanji growls and glares at Zoro as he turns to face the lovely lady and girl, saying, stop being a bastard to the lovely lady and girl. I am so sorry my dears. The mosshead doesn't have any manners. He informs them. Zoro rolled his eyes at the lovesick idiot and said, whatever. Get your ass over here love cook so we can get this meat packs and stored. Both men fought with each other as they cut up the meat and stored it in the ship. Sanji lets out a sigh. He sighs again and says, we have too much meat and I don't want to let it go to waste. Naruto pulled out a number of storage scrolls and said, if you're worried about wasting it, then I can store it in some scrolls. I can seal it away in these and if what Luffy is thinking. You two have tapped into your chakra network at a young age already. So we can train you in chakra control and show you sealing as it is a basic that it has been taught to us as children. He said to the 2 people in front of him. Excellent. Come one mosshead, let's finish slicing and packing the meat and we'll have Naruto seal it away for us. Said Sanji with a grin on his face as he lets out a stream of smoke. Purr. Luffy's hat is ringing. He settles into a lawn chair in the middle of the lower deck and remarks, wonder who's calling. When Luffy realized it was his mother's snail, he asked, hello. Hello sweetie, I need to speak to Naruto, said Tsunade in a loving tone as she spoke to her son. Luffy got up, walked over to the railing, and jumped down beside Naruto, saying, yeah, sure mom. I'll go take over on sealing the meat away for him. As he removes the scroll from Naruto's grasp and hands the snail over, Luffy says, hey, you have a call. Luffy has stolen one of Naruto's sealing scrolls, and Naruto blinks as he takes the snail from him. He responds, Umayuro hello, unsure of what is happening or who would want to talk to him. With a frown that was mirrored by the small snail on his open palm, Tsunade said, hello brat. We need to talk. Hello Ba-chan. What do you need to talk to me about and why can't this wait until we see each other in Alabaster? Questions Naruto, wondering what's going on. No brat, this cannot wait. For you need to hear this, said Tsunade as another voice is heard behind her. He hears Tsunade growl at the person behind her, saying, you need to tell him. Ino asks, Naruto, as the snail mimics her blush. Ino, how are you doing Ino, and why are you with Ba-chan and the others? Asks a bewildered Naruto, who feels uneasy when he hears the anxiety and fear in her voice. Naruto, I need to tell you I'm pregnant. I just found out when I left on a mission with Choji, Hinata, and Sakura. But the only person I told I was pregnant with your child was Choji. For I couldn't handle the drama from Sakura or Hinata, said Ino as tears began to run down her cheeks. As they headed for the Grand Line's entrance, Shika said, it's okay Ino. Naruto will not turn you away. Choji was sitting next to them on the small boat. Oh my flower maiden, I love you and I can't wait to know if we are going to have a son or a daughter. I don't give a damn if those two found out. It would be slap to the bitch I call a mother's face as I did leave an heir. Said Naruto, who was now reflecting her own tears. At this, Luffy, Sanji, and Zoro froze and exchanged glances. When Nami, Vivi, and the other two new crew members learned that the blonde man on their crew would soon become a father, they were shocked and had their hands over their mouths. Lady Tsunade told me that the new Hokage has placed me on vacation. But I am going to call him and tell him I am retiring as a shinobi and travel with Lady Tsunade, as Choji has also wants to take leave for a while and be by my side to protect me until I join up with you. Ino was weeping. Though he wasn't sure how to feel, Naruto said, well, we are going to Alabaster, but we are going to war against a warlord who is trying to overthrow our friend's father and destroy her country. But I can't wait to see you. With a big cheesy smile, he said, I want you to call the Hokage and let her know. Ino giggled nervously and said, okay, I'll call him in a few minutes. But I have to go. Because Lady Tsunade is glaring at me. After hearing a click, Naruto hands the snail back to Luffy and says, okay, I love you and I'll see you soon. Luffy put his hand on the newsman's shoulder and said, well, congratulations on the newsman. Naruto looks up at his captain as he turns. He tells him in a daze, yeah. Thanks Captain. Close to Logatown, Ino looks at Tsunade. She asks the older blonde in front of her, I am glad he is alive. But what is he doing now? Sabo laughs. He has joined the crew of my little brother and his crew. They are sailing to Alabaster to overthrow a royal warlord of the world government. He said to Ino with her mouth wide open. Choji laughs. He turned back to face Ino and remarked, I wouldn't rule out Naruto helping them. I think it's time to call Kakashi-sensei and rub salt into that woman's wounds. Everyone has a sinister smile on their faces. Let's do this. With a dark chuckle, Ino said, fuck them. She also needed to call her parents. The Tower of Hokage. Sitting in Kakashi's office, Kushina remarked, I don't see why I need to be called here. Your brother Shanks-sama called me. He requested that you get off your ass and start teaching the art of sealing to Genin, Chunin, Jonin, and Anbu. Kakashi grinned and said, he doesn't want your family art to be forgotten because you were the last Uzumaki in the village. Purpur. The snail ring that had been on his desk since he had called Tsunade and neglected to put it away suddenly appeared. With a cheaper tone in his voice, Kakashi clapped his hands together and said, ah. That must be Lady Tsunade and allowing me to know what has happened with Ino. Hello Lady Tsunade, Kakashi said, his snail mirroring his eye smile. Hokage-sama, hello. This is Ino, Ino said, giving her new Hokage a charming smile. Oh, Ino, how are you? With a hint of concern in his voice, asked Kakashi. I'm all right. Shika, Choji, Sabo, and Lady Tsunade saved me. The bastard who had abducted me was killed. However, I have to talk to you about something, Hokage-sama, Ino sighed. I am glad you are safe, and is Choji going to be joining you until you return? Who is this Sabo, too? Inquiry. Kakashi is now considering his other shinobi, who is with this Sabo and Ino. I am retiring from being a shinobi, Ino says with a smile as it is reflected by the snail. For the morning we left on our mission to the land of Wave. I discovered I am expecting a child. As for Choji, he wants to stay with me until I don't need his help. I can't use my chakra while pregnant as well. We are meeting up with Lady Tsunade's youngest son and other eldest son. As for Sabo, he is the second eldest of Tsunade's 3 sons. She tells him as she can see Kakashi's jaw drop from the snail mirroring it. Well, who is your child's father? As Kakashi looks up at Kushina, he asks him a question because he has an idea. Naruto and Ino had been very close for a few years, and he had told his sensei that he was seeing Ino before departing for the war. It's none other than Naruto Uzumaki. With a gentle smile, Ino remarked, the late true clan heir of the Uzumaki clan. What? Screaming, Kushina says, don't lie. Naruto had no knowledge of love, for if he did, she hisses at the blonde across from the snail, saying, he would have been with the Hyuga girl. There's a scuff. It demonstrates your level of knowledge about your son. When he returned from the war, I planned to marry them. Finally, though, he never went back to the village. Tsunade glared at Kushina as he said, leaving his love with their child. Kakashi looked at Kushina and said, I am happy that we will have your baby to remember his father. He also said, I will have the paperwork done for you and Choji. Are you claiming to have knowledge of this, Kakashi? Kushina is glaring at the man and making demands. Yes, I was aware of their relationship. Kakashi sighed sorrowfully, but I didn't know about the baby until now, and poor Naruto died never learning about his child. After I cross the Grand Line, I'll be meeting Shanks. With a shit-eating smile on her face, Tsunade said, I have your future sister-in-law with me because he politely asked me to pick her up before I left the East Blue. I am going to travel with the Straw Hat Pirates for a while and maybe play pirate until I can't anymore, laughed Ino. Well, enjoy yourself, Ino. Please give your parents a call, Kakashi said, grinning as he hung up. Kakashi, what the fuck? You can't let her do what she wants. In her belly is the new clan heir. When roars Kushina finds out that her son had a secret lover and is now expecting a love child in 9 months, she becomes furious and growls. With a glare of his own, Kakashi levels her and says, you have no say in main family business. I'm going to give Shanks a call regarding this. He glares her back into her seat and says, you are now just a lowly branch member of the Uzumaki clan. His silver eyes turn icy. Kushina hisses, this will not be the end of this, Kakashi. Yes. He growls as 2 Anbu show up and take her to T and I to be imprisoned. It will be for you. You will now be imprisoned in Anbu until I speak with the clan head to figure out what to do with you with your disrespect you have shown to the Hokage. With a sigh, Kakashi searches for Shanks' number to notify him of his sister's outburst and the impending birth of a child. Alongside Shanks, all right, Haki, Shanks laughed and said, I'm happy to see my nephew alive and my sister being put in her place. Mihawk took a sip of his red wine and sighed, saying, I am so glad I never wasted my time to meet that sister of yours. Purpur, sitting on his knee, his snail rang. Shanks put his tanker down and picked up the snail, saying, I should get that thing drunk. Hey, you have the dashing red hair, Shanks, he said. Who is calling, may I ask? He laughed as he looked at Mihawk, who merely rolled his eyes at him. I'm dashing my ass, Mihawk said. I'm more of a fool than anything else. Hey, Shanks, this is Kakashi, the new 7th Hokage of Konoha, said Kakashi's voice. He said to the man, I called to let you know about some exciting new information regarding your late nephew Naruto. Shanks and Mihawk exchange glances, and Ben looks up from his book as the others pause to listen. Kakashi-sama, what would that be? Shanks smiles as he asks. I recently found out that Lady Tsunade, a shinobi who has retired, is traveling with Naruto's girlfriend, who is expecting his child. Unfortunately, Kushina was in my office when Ino called to inform me that she was expecting his child. After discovering this, in a panic, Kushina demanded that Ino come back and Shanks interrupted Kakashi. She acted like the pampered brat that she is. I want you to punish her appropriately for her disrespectful behavior toward you. If necessary, consult the Hyuga and Nara clans for suggestions on how to discipline her. Unfortunately, she would have been bound and expelled from my ship to be devoured by a sea king if she had been on board. But I can't deliver my own punishment because she is a shinobi, Shanks said, frowning. She might benefit from being whipped, even though it is already too late for one, said Mihawk taking another drink of his wine. Shanks snorts. That might work, but we need a punishment fitting a shinobi. He tells Mihawk as his eyes light up. I want you to seal her chakra until I show up to unseal it. He told Kakashi. As you wish, as you are the clan head, said Kakashi as he pulls out the seals Tsunade had made before Jiraiya made for this very purpose. Excellent, Shanks grinned and said, if you need those seals sent to you, let me know and I'll have my summons take you some. No, To keep Kushina out, Lady Tsunade had Jiraiya make a seal. Because ever since she returned to the village, the woman has been annoying her. Kakashi grinned. Excellent. Tell me if it works, though. For if it doesn't. Before the silver-haired man could say anything else, Shanks grinned and said, then I will send my summons. Now I am going, for I have another party to throw. He laughed and hung up on Kakashi. Shanks laughed and said, well boys and ladies, I am going to be a great uncle. Mihawk said into his whine, the world is going to end now. As Shanks collapses, sulking at his best friend's worlds, everyone laughs. Shanks sat up and laughed, saying, well, we have a baby coming into the world soon as well. I am getting married and will have my own child as well. The world is really coming to an end. As Ben snorts with laughter, unable to contain his laughter, Mihawk said, there's another redhead running around in this world. Shanks flipped off Mihawk and Ben, saying, screw you hockey. Using the Strafuts. Hey, I'm happy to see an island. Usopp yells as they spot a winter island approaching. All right, stay on course for the island. I can't get my mom here in time because Nami isn't feeling well and my medical jutsu isn't the best either, Luffy calls, his hand glowing green with a golden aura as he runs it over Nami's body to reduce her fever and soothe her breathing and pulse. Please let us land here, Luffy says as he stands on his ship and surveys the people in front of them. We require a physician because one of my nakama has become ill. Because we don't have a doctor on our crew, he says to the audience as he drops to his knees and bows to them, causing tears to fall down his cheeks. A big man with a bull-like build comes forward and says, my name is Dalton. The village chief, he informs Luffy. With tears still in his eyes, Luffy looks up at Dalton and says, please, Dalton. Permit us to have a doctor on your island, treat our crewmate, he said, bowing his head again. Dalton examines the young man in front of him, a blonde young man holding a young woman with ginger hair in his blanket. All right, he said, come with me to Bighorn. Luffy and Naruto nodded as they leapt from the ship, using chakra to make their landing on the snow easier. They followed Naruto and Luffy, leaving no footprints in the snow where they had previously stood. Stay on the ship because my mom and brother will be arriving here within the day, and once they arrive, Luffy says, averting his gaze. The two named nod their heads as Vivi, Victoria, Pepper, and Usopp swallow and nod their heads as the two monsters of the monster quartet are already departing, leaving only the two other monsters to depart once Luffy's mother arrives. I want Zoro and Sanji to bring my mom and the others to us, he ordered. They follow Dalton and the other village guards after he leaves his orders for his crew. Drum Island is half a day away. Ace fueled his flames to propel his striker closer to his brother and mother after spotting a ship nearby with a marking he knew belonged to his brother. I see a flaming ship coming our way, calls out, unsure of how to react to this strange flaming man with a fire-powered ship. That is just my brother Ace. With a big grin on his face, Sabo exclaims, Mom, Ace is here. As he steps out onto the deck to see the ship approaching him with the white beard symbol on the striker's sails, he yells. When Tsunade emerges from the lower deck and sees her oldest son approaching, a smile gradually spreads across her face because she hasn't seen her oldest son all of her sons in a long time. When Ace sees his mother and brother, he smiles and leaps from the striker with a rope in hand. He lands on the ship's deck and ties it up right away, saying, Hey Mom, Sabo. Standing side by side, Ino and Shikamaru gazed at the young man with the raven hair they call their former Hokage mother. Come on over and give me a hug, my dear boy. I have really missed you, Tsunade said, grinning broadly. I have really missed you, Mom, Ace says with a smile as he approaches and embraces his mother. However, it will be fantastic now that you are here, he informed her. You can meet my captain. Yes. Pulling away from her embrace with her son, Tsunade said, I would like to Newgate. Ace smiles at Shizune and the other people with them. I have missed you as well, sis. Ace smiles at the woman with the raven hair who is holding the piglet. Is that piglet lunch? He asks, drooling a little when he sees Taunton. No, Shizune scowled at her younger brother and remarked, she is my pet. With a sheepish smile on his face, Ace said, oh, I'm sorry. He then moved to Sabo to avoid being smacked by their sister. Hey Ace, it's been a while, Sabo said, embracing his older brother. As the second commander, how is life going? With an uneven smile on his face, he asks. I have to take care of my siblings and deal with too much paperwork. as well as crew members who joined the 2nd Division following my promotion to second commander. Ace smiled as he said to his younger brother, but I have a few that I wonder if I should trust or just keep one of my summons watching them. It would be ideal because I keep hearing stories about a Whitebeard's member operating a side crew and engaging in dubious activities. The name of the man is unknown to me. All I hear is the moniker Blackbeard, Sabo informs his brother. I'll have to look into it once I return to the Mobi, or I could call Marco and inform him and have he look around with Izo's help. Ace said with a slight scowl, as he picked up the snail from his shoulder and responded to the small snail, purr. His blue eyes moved to the ringing snail, and he said, "It seems like Luffy is calling." "Hey," answers Sabo in a bewildered manner. "Hi, Sabo, we have already arrived at Bighorn's Drum Island. However, in order to heal Nami from the purple mark on her stomach, we will be traveling to the Drum Rookies in search of an elderly witch. Therefore, if you arrive before us, we can visit the old witch and the Drum Rookies." With a small smile on his face that the snail was mirroring, Luffy said, "Zoro and Sanji will guide you, Mom, and who else will be coming?" Sabo grinned at his brother and said, "All right, sounds like a plan." Before he could say anything more, Luffy hung up on them after hearing him scream about monster bunnies. Ace grinned and grabbed the chains that Sabo had at the head of the boat, saying, "I can tow you with the striker first to arrive sooner at Drum Island." "Yes." As the others blinked at the odd young man in the orange cowboy hat, Sabo said, "Let's get moving." They feel a lurch that pulls the larger ship faster as he jumps off the ship to the striker, attaches the chains to his small one-man ship, lights his flames, and burns the rope that was attached to his brother's boat. Rockies on drums. After saving their parent from being buried in the snow, Luffy glances over at a baby Lapon that follows them. "So, will you accompany us all the way up the mountain?" He asks the tiny rabbit monster a question. Naruto simply chuckles as the baby Lapons jump onto Luffy's back and slowly nod its head. "It appears you have a new little friend and maybe nakama," Naruto said to his captain. Luffy giggles and pats the head of the small monster rabbit, saying, "Shishishishi. But we need to get up there quickly." His feet glowed purplish blue as he stepped onto the mountain, and Naruto followed suit as they ran up the mountain. As Naruto and Luffy run up the side of the Drum Rookies, Naruto's feet glow a gentle blue. Naruto looked at his captain as the baby Lapon wrapped its tiny paws around the young man's neck and said, "If we keep this pace up we should be up that mountain within the next 10 or so minutes." Luffy smiles broadly as he turns to face Naruto. As he leapt over some snow that was falling from the mountain's edge, he replied, "Yeah." Naruto does the same. Off Drum Island's coast, as they start to move more quickly, Ace calls back over his shoulder, "Hey guys, I see the island just ahead of us." His flame gets brighter. On deck is Sabo. He yells, "Ace, slow down before you wreck my ship." At his older brother. Tsunade peeks out from the cabin where she sat in the morning sipping her coffee. She asks her son, who is desperately clinging to the railing, what's happening. Sabo glances at his mother over his left shoulder. He can hear his little ship creaking from the stress of being pulled by a crazy pyro head, so he tells her with concern, just yelling at Ace to slow down as he is going to break my ship. Tsunade sighs and reaches up to pinch the bridge of his nose with her right hand. She sighs again and gives her oldest son a glare as she watches him shiver and slowly turn to face the person whose cold stare is staring him down. His head snaps back before him, revealing a canal that leads to the main portion of the island, and a sheepish smile appears on his lips. Since it wouldn't help them if Sabo's ship collides with the striker, he reduces their speed. Now that he can feel his ship slowing down, Sabo sighs. He turned to face his mother and remarked, "It appears we have finally arrived." Ace smiles as the Going Merry materializes in front of him. Sanji and Zoro are standing on the deck. Usopp is attempting to stop them from fighting again, but Sanji is fighting with a cigarette between his lips and his leg up against Zoro's sword. The sound of something approaching from the sea causes Usopp to look up. When he notices two ships approaching them, his eyes brighten. Tears are streaming down his cheeks as he cries, "Ships are coming our way." He hopes they are the people their captain told them would be arriving. Sanji and Zoro both freeze and turn to face Usopp. In front of them is a man in black cargo shorts, matching boots, an orange elbow brace, and an orange cowboy hat without a shirt. Sanji looks at Zoro and asks, "Who the hell is that shitty bastard?" Zoro looks at the foolish shit cook and sighs. He turned away from the idiot standing beside him and remarked, "I think one of Captain's brothers. The other ship also holds the other family and shinobi." Sanji's eyes widen as he realizes he just made a mistake, and all he wants to do is slap the idiot. Ace pulls his brother's ship and Striker behind his younger brother's ship. 3 men are standing there staring at him with wide eyes as he notices trees growing on the upper deck. He gives them a sly smile. As he tilts his head up to get a better view of the 3 gawking at him and all his fiery glory, he calls out to them, "Yo." As he spun on his heel and looked over at the blonde smiling at him, a blonde wearing a black top hat and goggles emerged from the ship's cabin to pull back the chains that the raven-haired man wearing the orange cowboy hat with its own goggles and smiley faces on the lenses had thrown back to him. Sabo growls at his brother, narrowing his blue eyes. "Ace, you know you're an asshole. If I hadn't coated my hands with armament hockey you could have broken them." Ace rubs the back of his neck with the back of his right hand. Sorry, I am used to the guys back on the Moby being able to handle me throwing chains like I just did to you," he said to his brother. At his brother, Sabo rolls his eyes. With a tone of irritation, he replied, "Yeah, and I'm a Marine." As he bowed to him, Ace mockingly remarked, "Well, Gramps will be very proud of you, little brother." He continued to smirk and said, "I best run from you once we are done here. For I can't have you taking me to impel down." As flames spread from the impact area, a kunai sails through Ace. He tells his older brother, "Shut up and let's dock. We need to get Mom to Luffy and his sick crewmate." As he picked up the rope from his striker to the post, leapt onto land, and quickly made his way to his brother's ship, Ace said, "All right." As a girl with raven hair emerges from the cabin and approaches the rope to toss it to the other man with raven hair, he tells Sabo, "Here, throw me your rope so I can tie you to the docks." "Thanks." He grinned broadly. Shikamaru turns to face the man with the raven hair in front of her, observing his movements without concern for the cold that envelops them all. He jumped around, scooped up some snow in his hands, and threw it at his brother, who had just emerged from the cabin wearing a warmer coat. When snow hits Sabo in the face, she screams. As he stalks over to his brother, Sabo growls, "Damn it, Ace, are you ever going to grow up?" He leaps from the ship and rushes over to Ace, prepared to toss his ass into the snowdrift behind him. Ace simply gives him a smile and digs his feet further into the snow, being aware of what's coming. As the other people emerge from the cabin wearing winter clothing, they focus on the 2 people rolling around in the snow, with Ace's body emitting steam and Sabo resembling a snowman with snow shoved into his coat. As she leaps from the ship, Tsunade snarls, "Boys, that is enough. We need to move and get to Luffy." She then approaches them and slams a fist into their heads. When Shikamaru sees a black sheen emanating from the blonde woman's hands, she raises an eyebrow. The 2 brothers move their hands over their heads and scream in agony. Following the former Hokage, the others leap from the ship and see a man with green hair and another with blonde hair approaching them. Zoro stepped forward and said, "Luffy has ordered us to take you to where he is at," pretending to be his first mate. As he exhaled smoke, Sanji remarked, "He has gone up to the Drum Rookies to where the only doctor of this island lives." With her hands on her hips and her honey brown eyes, the blonde woman takes another step. The same eyes that the previous 2 were so familiar with from their own captains. "Who are you 2? She asks, sounding irritated. With a small smile, Zoro declared, "I am Roronoa Zoro, the first mate of the Straw Hat Pirates." Sanji bowed to the woman in front of him and said, "I am Sanji, the chef of the Straw Hat Pirates." His gaze moves to the other 5 women in the group. When he saw them, his eyes changed into hearts. "Knock it off, shitty cook. For if the captain sees you hitting on his family he will kick your ass. I believe the blonde-haired girl is Naruto's girlfriend and I know he will kick your ass to another island. As well, one of the older girls is red-haired. So do you want to deal with Luffy, Naruto and Shanks? Because you are not able to stop your damn flirting?" Zoro asks at the end. When Sanji hears this, she gradually starts to feel pale. He can hear the other person laughing in the background, so he turns to look at Zoro. With a big smile on his face and flames dancing around his fist, Ace said, "Makino is like a sister to us. Shizuna is also a sister to us." The blonde has a dark smirk on his face as he takes a pipe out of his back. With a dazzling smile that is reflected by the other person standing next to him, he tells the cook of his little brother's crew, "I do not want you flirting with my family and my partner Koala. I know she is able to handle herself as well as my sisters. But I do not take so kindly to perverts." At this, Zoro snorts. Laughing aloud as he spoke, he said, "About damn time someone puts him in his place." Sanji turns to face Zoro and gathers himself again. He snarls at Zoro, "Shitty bastard. Shut the hell up." Zoro spun on his heel and said, "Oh, shut up. We gotta get moving. I don't have time for your shit for once." Sanji complains as he does the same. He stuffed his hands into his coat pockets and remarked, "Let me lead the way, Moss Head, because you get lost so easily." While the others trail behind them, Zoro merely complains as he follows the obnoxious blonde. As the others slowly nodded their heads in agreement with the antics they had just witnessed from two of her son's crew, Tsunade said, "My son does have his hands full with these two." Within the castle, joy played through Luffy's eyes, making them widen. As they wait to learn more about Nami's situation in another room, Naruto glances at his captain. With astonishment in his blue eyes, Naruto asks, "What's up, Luffy?" He glances at his most recent crew member. He moved to the door and said, "My mom and the others are here." He could feel them at the foot of the mountain and wanted to go meet them. At the mountain's base, Soon makes a fist and cracks her knuckles while smiling. She turned to face Ino and the others who were unable to use chakra and declared, "I am going to make a path up this damn thing." Sanji raises an eyebrow at the woman in front of them. As he watches her slam her fist against the mountainside and several steps slowly start to form, he dies on his words, "What do you mean NNN?" Ace and Sabo approach their mom. As he and Ace rushed up the mountainside, punching and kicking into the mountainside to clear the path for everyone, Sabo smiled and said, "Let's finish this, Mom. Because you need to save your chakra just in case the other doctor isn't able to treat her." As Tsunade ascended the improvised stairs her son had constructed for them, she said, "Let's go." After nearly an hour of climbing, they saw a boy standing there wearing a red coat, shorts, and those damn flip-flops he never takes off, regardless of the weather. As Ace leaps up and lands on his feet in front of them, Luffy yells, "Ace and Sabo," and leaps into his arms. "Hey Lu," said Ace, laughed as he gave the young monkey a hug in return. Luffy leaps from his older brother's arm into his middle brother's arms while grinning. "Hey Lu, I have missed you." Sabo gave his younger brother a hug in return. Tsunade advances beside his three sons. She says to him, "Hello my little cub." When Luffy saw his mother, his eyes grew wide. He screams, "Mom," as he clambers into his mother's arms after escaping Sabo. His rubbery arms repeatedly encircle her as Tsunade gives him a bone-crushing hug while her infant giggles in her arms. She gives him a forehead kiss. "I have missed you so much, my little cub. I am just glad you are still happy to see your foolish mother." She says to him, "Mom, you're no fool. You are my beautiful mother, that I love so much and happy to see again. I just wish you would have called us during that war. We would have dropped everything just for you and go kick those bastard asses," said Luffy as his honey brown eyes sparkle with a soft golden glow. Tsunade leaned into him and whispered in his ear, saying, "I know, baby. I know you all would have come and aided me. But I couldn't do that. Baby, the war was over. Beast that a bastard wanted to use to control our world." When Luffy heard this, his eyes grew wide. As he pulls back and gives her a kiss on the left cheek, he whispers back, smiling, "I see. But it wouldn't have mattered to Mom. No one knows about the last one. Even the others have forgotten about him. For the one sealed within Naruto is trying to figure out what I am. They are both very confused." Tsunade laughs at his clowning. While his two brothers were laughing at the face their brother was making, she said to her baby, "Also baby. You need to stop playing a fool. I know you have been putting up an act for everyone to underestimate you." However, Soon turns around and glances at her other two sons. She smirks and says, "That goes for you two morons as well." Sabo smiled at her and said, "I do, Mom. I am second in command behind Dad." Ace crosses his chest with his arms. He complains to his mother in front of him, "But it's more fun for everyone to think of me as a fool." A sigh escapes Tsunade's lips. She shook her head at the antics of her oldest son. "Ace, stop being a fool and show this pirate and marine world the mad genius you are. And that goes for you as well, Lu," she said with a grin on her face. Together, Luffy and Ace said, "Fine." A wicked smile appears on Luffy's face. He released his mother and said, "I don't know how my crew would handle that." Zoro and Sanji were staring at him with incapacitating eyes. He smiled and said, "Hey guys." Naruto shouts from the castle's open doors, "Hey Luffy." Luffy turns his head to face his new companion. "Yeah?" he questions as the shinobi's mouths hang open. At the sight before them, Naruto laughed, accustomed to his captain's antics and his friend's facial expressions. Nami is awake. Luffy grins brightly. I'm glad. Is Ba-chan going to let us see her? Shut up, brat. I'm still young at only 138 years old, said a woman dressed like a teenager and holding a bottle of wine in her hand as she takes a drink. Her eyes moving across the people standing before her. Her eyes stopping on one person and one person alone as the brat that has been calling her his Ba-chan unwraps himself from the woman's body. I see you're still kicking, brat, she said with a grin on her face. Tsunade said, I wouldn't die so easily, great-grandma Kurha Uzumaki. Naruto's mouth fell open when he saw the woman in front of him. So she is my Ba-chan? Luffy asks, glancing up at his mother. His eyes sparkle as he asks. Yes, Tsunade said, glancing down at her infant in front of her. She is, she remarked teasingly. Is he the brat you had, then? Kurha asks, grinning. Yes, Tsunade said. Well, this is Kushina's little brat, as Kurha's gaze shifted to the blonde standing and staring at her. The blonde next to you is your cousin, she smirked at him. Unfortunately, I couldn't reach the village in time to assist with his birth, she sighed. I didn't even arrive on schedule. However, I was informed that he had perished in the assault. He was separated from his family by those jerks. For if I had been aware of him. Tsunade put her ones on Ace and Sabo's shoulders and said, I would have taken him to live with Luffy and his two older brothers. As Kurha watched Ace slowly move forward and she heard his gentle snores, she said, Brat, your son is falling. As he holds his brother in his arms, Sabo sighs and turns to face his mother. I don't think he took his pills while we traveled to Drum. What's happening? A crimson-haired girl with brown eyes walks out of the doorway before her captain. Do you have any questions? Asks a voice behind Naruto and Dr. Kurha. Hey, Nami, mom and siblings and everyone has shown up, said Luffy grinning at her. Nami nods slowly in agreement with what her captain has just told them all, and then she turns around and returns to the castle, saying, oh, okay. She needs to lay down again because she is confused by everything that is happening right now. I think you broke her. Naruto snickering at Nami's reaction to everyone. Tsunade walked past her sons and toward her great-grandmother, saying, let me go in and check her out. What is a brat? Do you believe that, as a doctor, I am incompetent? Kurha asks, grinning. Her honey brown eyes were staring up at her when Tsunade smirked and said, well, I do question you being drunk and acting like a teenager. She passed the older woman, her smirk turning into a grin as she followed the girl she saw on the second floor back to her room. He has been missing a lot since that scary bastard showed up and drove him away, so Waffle and his men dock on the opposite side of the island near his beloved castle. He is accompanied by two clowns as they exit their submarine and make their way to the dock. Fine, I am home, and those pieces of shit will give me their money to pay for all I had lost that night. Waffle said, while the other two laughed and agreed with the little bastard. Castle. Luffy wanders around the hallways looking for his target as the others are visiting with Nami. Nami, how are you feeling? Zoro asks after knocking Sanji unconscious while he was flirting shamelessly with the ginger. I am doing better, she says, clasping her hands over her lap as she glances down at them and then back up at the others. I'm having trouble with one thing, she started. This made Zoro sit up straight because he wanted to know what was bothering the girl, even though he didn't always like her because she was still Nakama. He asks her because he wants to know. The doctor told me we will have to stay here for about 2 weeks, she says, holding her blanket under her hands. We don't have a doctor on board, and it wouldn't be safe for me to travel without one, she informs him. Zoro crosses his arms over his chest and nods his head, saying, that is problematic. We will need to come up with a solution. Because it's true, without a real doctor on staff, we can't continue to see patients. As the door to Nami's room is kicked open, he informs her, Luffy has stated that he is looking for one as we speak. When the door was kicked open, everyone turned to see Luffy standing there grinning broadly and holding something fuzzy and brown under his right arm. Well, I found our crew's doctor. Luffy continued to smile at everyone. Luffy, being Sabo as Ace interrupts him. Luffy, what the fuck? Ace growls as he gets up and walks over to his younger brother. Why didn't you just open the door like a normal person and not kick the damn thing down? Luffy smiles at Ace, his eyes sharpening and glowing a gentle purplish silver, his smile growing darker as his teeth lengthen. Are you willing to repeat yourself, Ace? His oldest brother, who seems to be experiencing a chill, stops dead in his tracks when he is questioned. The others in the room, mainly Zoro, Naruto, and Tsunade, notice that Ace is holding his hands up and taking a few steps back as Sabo's hand moves towards the seastone pipe that is resting on his back. The woman in question narrows her honey brown eyes at her youngest son. Good, growls out Luffy in a much darker voice. Kurama flies to his paws at the sound of that voice, his enormous red eyes wide with terror and terror coursing through his body. No a euro, no a euro. No a euro. Oh fucking hell no, he rambles in panic. As he fights the blossoming migraine Kurama is causing, Naruto's head snaps to the side. He puts pressure on his temples and raises his hands to his head to hold it. What the fuck, Kuruma? Naruto tries not to raise his voice any higher because he thinks his head might blow up. Something is going on with these two, and I have a feeling it has something to do with that seal Luffy had found on Naruto's stomach, Zoro observes out of the corner of his eye. Luffy is also hiding several things from us. Besides being insanely smart and extremely dangerous, there is also something hidden deep within that. What would that be? He asks himself. Kurama, who has already taken over Naruto's body, growls out, Raiju. The blonde's once bright blue eyes turn crimson as he adopts a more feral appearance, and the whisker lines on his cheeks deepen. With his dark blue eyes blown wide with horror at the insane levels of death emanating from two people in the room they are all in, Sanji immediately leaps from his resting place and turns to face Zoro, who simply shakes his head to keep the chef silent and prevent the man from doing something foolish. Luffy turns to face Naruto, who also seems feral. Hello little brother, Raiju said, his voice full of laughter. As his gloved hand flies up to cover his mouth, Sabo lets out the word, shit. Raju's eyes shift towards Luffy's middle brother. Keep calm brat. He laughs and dismisses everyone in the room, saying, I am not here to destroy the world, well, not yet. Everyone has turned pale at the thing that is using Luffy to communicate verbally. Enough Raiju, growls out Kurama as crimson narrow as he is glaring back at the damn lighting 10-tail wolf host standing before him. Also the almighty and powerful Kurama finally remembers his also-powerful elder brother, Raiju says, laughing at his younger brother's antics. Where the fuck have you been for the past 100 years? He growls out at his little brother. Well, jerk, when one of those fucking monkeys with those cursed eyes is brainwashing and controlling you, it can be difficult to find you. After that, it was sealed into an Uzumaki. Is it possible for me to escape one of them? Kurama frowns and growls at his brother for being a jerk to him. Raiju laughs softly and darkly, oh little brother, I do understand the pain. That mummy who lurked in the leaf's shadows had sealed me inside an Uzumaki girl who had been abducted and sexually assaulted. He shakes his head, dragging himself away from the agony he felt the night she killed herself and the night he was forced into his cub, with his cub nearly turning into that fucker's weapon. Believing himself to be the true power of the village when he was a fool who knew shit. He growls out the last part just thinking of his cub Iza. She was a poor child from the main family who was born with green hair, something that shocked the entire Uzumaki clan, but they still loved her despite everything. Yelling could be heard downstairs, and both of BIJU's hosts turned to face the open doorway with eerie, dark smiles on their faces. Raiju laughed and said, it's time to hunt. As they both ran out the open door, Kurama laughed and said, it has been a while since my last hunt. Raiju gave Ace the fuzzy brown object before he left, saying, hold my crew member. Ace simply nodded his head stupidly to the demon that was sealed inside his baby brother, the only thing that still gives him nightmares to this day. What are you doing in my castle? Asked Kurama Naruto and Riju Luffy as they land in front of a big man wearing metal and his men. Waffle demands, his voice full of annoyance. You do not belong here, Waffle, Riju Luffy says as he stops in front of the bastard who had attempted to devour his ship just a day earlier. With each step, crimson lightning sparks fly off his body. With a faint growl and a hint of arrogance in his voice, he declared, you are no longer the monarch of this island no longer. Who are you to give me commands? With a snare on his metal jaw, Waffle makes demands of the pirate captain in front of him. As his golden eyes gaze down at the man-child in front of him, Riju Luffy snares at him and lifts his head, watching him and the other men shudder in terror as his killer intent rolls off his body. My name is Riju, however, you are more familiar with my cub than I am. He introduces himself to the idiot in front of him as Senji Monkey D. Luffy. Waffle retreats a trembling step as Zoro, Sanji, Ace, Sabo, and Shikamaru emerge from the castle to observe the man in front of the two Biju hosts. What's happening? As flames lick his body, Ace narrows his silver eyes at the bastards in front of his cousin and baby brother, wondering about the last one. With red eyes, Kurama Naruto turns to face Ace. It seems that the jerk who fled with his tail between his legs has made a comeback. He snorts and tells the firefighter, now he is demanding to be seen as this country's king once more. With a deadpan expression, Sabo narrowed his dark blue eyes on Waffle and said, so you are the one that many other countries want you dead. Waffle is now staring at the blonde with the dark blue top hat, who is holding a pipe in his gloved-cover hands. Waffle is even paler now that he recognizes the man. Blue a euro, blue gentleman Sabo. He stammered as he landed on his enormous ass. So you know me, says Sabo, raising a blonde eyebrow. He tells the phony king of Drum Kingdom, I should feel honored. Who doesn't? We hear the Revolution Army hitman's whispers. Waffle stammers, his voice growing more terrified. That last part makes Sabo smile. Oh, you flatter me, he says to the former king of Drum Kingdom, who is now on the run. I wouldn't be worrying about myself. However, I'm more concerned about my younger brother and his crewmate, he says cowardly, turning to face the two Jinchuriki who were in front of them. As the 10 tails finished forming and dancing behind Luffy, Naruto switched to his 9-tail sage mode, and both Luffy and Naruto gave the man in front of them a savage smile. It appeared as though they were prepared to draw blood, and the blood they desired was Waffle's and his men's blood at that precise moment. With a truly demonic feral grin, Luffy growls, Waffle, I have one question for you. Waffle slowly retreats as he swallows the thickness in his throat. Do you feel lucky? Do you, then? His eyes gleam golden as he asks, laughing. Yes, I do, Waffle stammers while attempting to summon courage. When a drop of crimson liquid touched the pure white snow beneath Waffle's flip-flop foot, he and his men fell to the ground, either dead or seriously injured, and Luffy laughed at the poor bastard in front of him. As you wish, he tells him as Luffy disappears in an instant, standing behind the man with his hand out and blood dripping off of them. Waffle, you have set yourself up for this fate. The inhabitants of this tranquil snow island have been killed by you. As the 10 tails gradually started to return from where they had come with his ears and claws, leaving only his fangs, Luffy told him, killing and taking from the people that didn't have the money or food to give your gluttony ass. He was starting to calm down. What the fuck was that, Luffy? With his hand resting on his 3 swords, Zoro demands as he approaches his captain. It was my tail beast Riju, he says, blinking multiple times as he finally gained self-control. He then looks at Zoro, who is crouching to use the snow to clean his hands of the blood of the others. I am the 10 tails wolf's Jinchuriki. He informs his first mate that there are 9 more Jinchurikis in the elemental islands. Zoro tells him, dismissing it as if it were unimportant, that explains the odd energy I feel from you at times and why my troublemaking sort always becomes silent when you are around me. The other Strafuts simply gawk at the green-haired swordsman because of how readily he accepted what Luffy had just told him. However, Zoro turns to face Naruto and asks, so, you are the same as well? He asks the blonde. Yes, I am the Jinchuriki of the 9-tail fox Kurama, Naruto says, moving his right hand to massage the back of his neck. Kurama's younger brother. I nearly became each of the 9 Bijou's Jinchuriki. He informed Zoro and the others, but they wanted to either return to their former host, who is still alive, or just leave a happy, peaceful life with the summons. Zoro nods once more, heads for the castle's open doors, and grabs his beer bottle to finish it. Luffy simply laughed at his first mate's antics, who doesn't give a damn and only cares about making sure the others achieve their goals. That's our Zoro, he said in between giggles. The others simply started to perspire. The last day on Drum. As Naruto stands atop the Going Merry, Luffy turns to face Chopper. With his huge D grin, he says, I thank each and every one of you for allowing us to dock on your island for medical help. The other villagers are passed by Dalton. He said to the young captain in front of him, no, we should be the ones who thank you and your crew for saving us from our former king. Luffy smiles again. He said to the man in front of him, we are just happy to help you. Luffy turns to face his mother. As his mother is speaking to Ino, Shika, and Choji while they are devising a plan, he calls out to her, hey mom. Her son is the focus of her honey brown eyes. As she watches his cheeks turn dark, she asks, yes, baby. A smile spread across her face. Mom, Luffy exclaims, pulling his Strafut down over his head and stomping in place in an odd way, which has him being teased and ridiculed by Ace and Sabo. With a sly smile on his face, Ace teases, oh, my little baby. You're so adorable. Standing beside Ace, smirking at his younger brother's antics, Sabo teasingly says, "It's okay baby, we'll take good care of you." Tsunade snarls at her oldest sons, "That is enough you two," as she approaches her infant son. She pulls him into her arms and asks, "What is it, Lu?" She wrapped her arms around him and gave him a hug, an embrace she had not given him since he was a young boy. "Until we arrive in Alabaster, will you be traveling on Sabo's ship or mine?" With his own honey brown eyes staring up at her, he asks her. "Oh, until then, I'll be traveling with you," Tsunade told him, smiling, "as I want to watch over Ino closely." Luffy grinned up at her. "You know." Naruto turned to face Chopper after glancing down at the small reindeer standing beside him. "What is Naruto doing there?" Chopper asks, turning to face the blonde standing beside him. With a corny smile, Naruto tells him, "You remind me of my summons." "What are summonses?" Chopper asks, staring up at the blonde boy in front of him with bewildered eyes that are a rare midnight blue that just barely matches his blueberry blue nose. Kurama laughs and tells his kitten host, "Summon one of the fox kits." As he performs a series of hand signals, Naruto smiles and raises his right thumb to his mouth, bites into it, and then lowers it again while running his thumb across his left palm. Summoning jutsu. As a plume of smoke forms in front of him and Chopper on the ship's rail, he yells, "Hi, Naruto-kun, do you require anything?" A soft pink fox kit with a matching nose and hot pink eyes is asked this question. When Chopper sees the kit sitting on the railing in front of him, his mouth drops open in disbelief. She can talk like me," he nearly yells, but he holds back because he knows that loud noises frighten foxes away. As she tilts her head to the right and looks at the talking reindeer, the little pink kid raises an eyebrow and asks, "Are you not a summons yourself?" Her little voice is laced with wonder as she asks, "Blossom, this helicopter isn't a summons." Naruto tells the young kid seated in front of him, he is a talking reindeer who had eaten a devil fruit known as the human fruit. Blossom leans forward and sniffs, saying only, "Oh." She blinks as she looks up at Naruto and tells him, "He does smell like one of the deer summons young." Chopper and Naruto are now scowling at what she said. Chopper frowned again and said, "My parents are just normal reindeers." Blossom huffs and puffs out her little cheeks, saying, "Well, they could be of a lesser branch that isn't able to use their abilities." Naruto nodded his head and said, "That could be." He is attempting to ease Blossom's frustrations. "So, what else is there?" Blossom asks as she prepares to go back to her mother. Naruto says, "No, I just wanted to show Chopper what a summons was." Blossom simply nods and waves at them with her little paw as she ascends in yet another cloud of smoke. As her boyfriend was too preoccupied to talk to her, Ino climbs aboard the ship and glares at him. "Naruto," she calls in a soothing, silky voice to her idiot. As he slowly turns to face his gorgeous girlfriend, Naruto's body goes rigidly straight. "Ino Mihime," he says, his voice trembling slightly as the pale blonde approaches him up the stairs. Now that she was in front of him, Ino repeated, "Naruto." "Yes, my dear Ino." With one of his endearing grins, which had caused her to fall deeply in love with him so long ago, Naruto asks her a question. She sighs and shakes her head at his antics, knowing full well that he has no idea what true family love is. "Why hadn't you waited for me to join?" she questions him. "I didn't want to interrupt you while you spoke with Ba-chan and your teammates." Naruto tells her, resting his chin on top of her head and towering over her as he reaches for her hand and pulls her into his arms. "Naruto, this is our new life." Ino sighed, knowing that he would never pull her into the shadows and would always stand out in the shadows to let her shine in the sun. "Together, I want to stand out in the sunshine. We no longer have to wait because we are equals. Away from the fucking village that has only caused you pain, we are always from your family." Naruto sighs. He pulls away from her and gives her a sincere smile while saying, "I know. But old habits are hard to break. Seldom seen." He tells her, "But I shall try." With a smile, Ino tells him, "That's all I can ask for." As Shika approaches the two from behind, she remarks, "Troublesome." Choji, munching on his chips, followed them. And his endless supply of chips. Ino sulks at her closest pals. She smiled as she said, I know. Shika gives her a small smile and says, "Just hurry up and get married." Now this has the two teens sputtering and blushing bright red. "Hey," Luffy calls out as he saves the day for the young couple. Everyone is staring at Luffy as a result. As they set out on their journey through his bizarre pirate world, he grinned broadly and declared, "It's time to sail. As we have a civil war to stop." "Yay!" exclaims everyone. Well, all the pirates as the shinobi look on with amusement. As they are now entering the life of a pirate. Vivi stands with Ino looking over a map laying upon the dining room table. "This here is my home island. The land I am willing to fight for," Vivi tells Ino with a faraway smile. "I understand that. We just had our great fourth shinobi war. To protect our home from Madara and the rabbit goddess." Ino tells her with her own frown at the thought of friends and family they all had lost to a madman. Vivi glances at the blonde standing next to her. So, the rumors in the East Blue with the Elemental Islands a war was waging and could make it way to the Grand Line was true. She questions Ino. Stupidly, Ino blinds the girl next to her. "You heard about our war?" She questions, not sure how to feel about it. "Yes, I am a princess and all royals across the world heard about your war. They had been readying their troops just in case the Broke Works members as well were kept in the loop as well. As Mr. Zero wanted to see if he could profit off the war." Vivi replies with a scowl. With a sly smile on her face, Ino declared, "Well, Mr. Zero will be getting a piece of my mind once we arrive at your home island." As Tsunade enters the kitchen, Vivi asks, "But I thought Tsunade-sama said you have to take it easy." Tsunade looks at the two girls examining a map of Alabaster and asks, "What are you brats looking at?" "Tsunade-sama, we are looking at a map of Vivi's home island. The land Captain Luffy and the others promised to save from," Mr. Ino informs Tsunade. Zero. As she pondered how this could have continued for so long without Dragon and his people learning about it, Tsunade said thoughtfully, "Hamayuro, I am shocked my husband hadn't helped with what is happening there. Any matter, we shall do what we are able to help your people." She added as she caught a glimpse of Naruto sleeping on the couch. Ino looks in Tsunade's direction. He has been through so much, at just 16 years old a Euro. But now he can choose for himself on what path he will be taking as well a Euro finally get the rest he has so earned. She said to the older blonde. If only his father hadn't died that night. I do believe Naruto would have had a better life. Tsunade stated to Ino. She lets out a sigh and shuts her eyes. She continued, still wishing she had put an end to that woman before departing, but at last that wasn't his fate. His fate was to suffer from those who claimed to be his family. He would have had a better life as an orphan. Then have a woman like that as his mother. I did my best to give Naruto a normal and happy life as his friend and then his girlfriend and a Euro. Ino is overcome with emotion. Tsunade snorts. With a maternal grin, she tells Ino, I know. You made the brat happy. In retrospect, she remarked, at times I wonder what would have happened if I had sent Naruto to go live with Luffy. It was a thought that Shanks himself had recently expressed. Luffy is perched atop the Going Merry's sheep's head. This is going to be fun with all the shinobi on my crew for the time being. He said to Mary as no one besides Zoro was near him. You think so? Zoro asked, opening his left eye to see Luffy in the distance, where a Nara girl was napping with her arms acting as makeshift pillows. Luffy smiled as they saw Chopper playing with Choji, who was enlarging his hands for the young Dr. Reindeer. Well yeah, they can move swiftly and know a few tricks we don't. What I heard is that Ino is able to enter one's mind as Sheikah over there is able to stop you only using shadows. Interesting indeed, Zoro concurred, and a childlike laugh filled the room, being heard by only a few people. Hearing the happiness emanating from his poor, battered ship made Luffy smile. Smoker is standing on his ship's deck. Where are you heading to Strafut? He questions himself as he had been looking at a map of where Luffy and his crew had made port at so far. Well, the locations he is aware of. So far the Strafuts have been to the lighthouse that we all land at once we enter the Grand Line, then they landed at Whiskey Pike. Then made their way to Drum Island that is now known as Sakura Island. Where he defeated the former King Waffle, who had abandoned his people when a mysterious crew had attacked the island. Now reports are coming back that they are now headed towards Alabaster. For now reasons are unknown. Tashigi tells her captain. Smoker asks aloud, why Alabaster? As Smoker looks down at the files in her hand and pushes up her glasses, Tashigi says, I am unsure. But what I heard the villagers say. They have the princess of Alabaster with them. Tashigi is asked by Smoker, the long-lost princess that many believe to be dead. As she turns to go with the files to check if they have heard back from any nearby marine bases on the Strafuts, Tashigi responds, apparently so. Smoker gazes out over the ocean. Holding the 2 cigars between them, he gritted his teeth. He growls between gritted teeth, I will find you Strafut and I will be you to justice. Having a good time, Usopp puts away his spyglass and yells, land. From the crow's nest. Vivi comes running out of the girl's room. She asks Usopp, did you say land? As he descends from the crow's nest, Usopp tells her, yeah, we are about an hour maybe 2 hours out from landfall. Vivi turned on her heel and hurried up the stairs into the kitchen, where Luffy was at the table studying a map while his mother was pointing something out to him. Thank you for telling me, Vivi said. Tsunade grinned and said to her son, right here Luffy is where I was when Naruto and Jiraiya found me. Luffy told her, Mom, you should have joined us long ago. We missed you, he added with a sad smile. Vivi rushes into the kitchen before Tsunade or Luffy can finish speaking. She calls out to him, Luffy. Gazing at the door that is open, Luffy gives her a smile. His question to the brunette is, what is it Vivi? Naruto collapses from the couch he was sleeping on upon hearing the door slam open. Huh? Naruto asks, scanning the room in confusion. As the door behind her closed, Vivi raised her hands to her mouth and exclaimed, oh. Naruto, I'm so sorry. Naruto waved her away and rubbed his head, saying, it's fine. As he pushes himself up on a single elbow to turn and look towards the table. As Ino stops at the table with her cup of mint tea and giggles, he asks, so what have I missed? Luffy asks, bringing everyone back to the girl, so what did you come in here for Vivi? Vivi smiles broadly and says, oh, I almost forgot, we are close to Alabaster. As he pulls out a sucker because he ran out of cigarettes 2 days ago, Sanji says from behind Vivi, I'm glad to hear that. We really need to resupply. Shika would never, ever consider going with Sanji on another pack. Who is a pack a second type of moron? Anyways, you were saying Vivi, Luffy said shaking his head at the rudeness of Sanji interrupting Vivi. We need to pick up clothing for our journey through the deserts of Alabaster. As well as any foods high in water and easy to travel with. Vivi began to tell them. Naruto pushed himself to stand up and said, that wouldn't be a problem. You can buy anything you need and we can seal it away all food and water to make it easy to carry across the desert. He then reached into his back pouch and took out one of his storage scrolls. See, this is a storage scroll, which I have water and ramen and a few veggies seal in. He said as he looks at Sanji who was looking at him strangely. You might need to show them, Naruto, Ino said, winking at Luffy, who already knew. Naruto nodded and opened his scroll to reveal his sealed vegetables. They have been sealed in this scroll for about 3 months now I think, he said, looking a little perplexed because he couldn't remember the last time he had fresh vegetables for his ramen. 3 months. As they wondered whether they would see rotten vegetables, Vivi and Sanji uttered the same words. Naruto slammed his hand on the scroll after running through a few hand signals, and fresh fruits and vegetables appeared in front of everyone in a plume of smoke. Sanji approaches the fruit and vegetable table, picks up a tomato, examines it, and gives it a light squeeze before exclaiming in disbelief, it's fresh. Yeah, as if everyone knew it, Naruto said, so feel free to use those for dinner tonight and if you need the ramen I have sealed away for now to feed everyone before we make landfall you can. Sanji just nodded his head stupidly as more smoke was visible and countless ramen cups appeared in front of everyone. Geez Naru, have you once more purchased the entire village? Ino makes fun of her partner. Naruto winked and said, nope, just stock up all the time. Alabaster. Naruto is standing next to Luffy as he surveys the old, abandoned dock. So, we are here to gather supplies as well as gather clothing for desert weather. Naruto checked again. Yes, that's right, Luffy said, glancing around at the other people. Sanji says, I'll get the food and the clothing. Just get the food, please. Concerned about what the blonde would purchase for the girls, Naruto grinned and said, we'll get the clothes. Once the ship had docked at port, Sanji pouted at Naruto for not letting him buy the girls' travel clothes so he could dress them up like belly dancers he had seen. Fine. He complained as Usopp accompanied him to haggle over the cost of the supplies they were going to purchase. If we let him buy the clothes, Naruto says, rolling his eyes. Luffy nods in agreement as he says, I have a feeling the girls wouldn't be wearing anything. Luffy concurs, saying, most likely. As they disappear into the marketplace, he tells Naruto, come on let's get this done. A half hour later, the boy returns to the ship while Luffy is making fun of Naruto. Usopp is carrying multiple jugs of water over his shoulders while Sanji continues to pout. Have you received everything? As she grew weary of waiting for them to come back, Nami asks. As for Naruto, he responds, yeah, we got everything. Well, for our part at least. Luffy informed them, we also bought proper clothing for the ladies as Sanji wanted to buy those belly dancer outfits for you. The man's face flushed as his scheme was exposed. How did you find out? Sanji asked him as Ace and Sabo glared at him as their mother is part of the group. If you tried forcing our mother into one of those outfits we would have burned you alive. Ace told Sanji as his fist went up in flames as Sabo slowly nodded his head as he pulled out his seastone pipe. Sanji raised his hands and stepped back. I didn't do anything, he said. I was just considering it. He stammered out, but I would have bought the proper outfits. Sweat trickled down his brow, and he dropped his cigarette. Enough of that, boys. He has learned his lesson, Tsunade said to her two sons, who were staring at her with pouts. All right. As the girls' laughter could be heard, they all said, Mom. Luffy chuckles at his brother's mischief with their mother, saying, Shish. Shish. That's what you two get. He continued to chuckle at them. Ace glares at his younger brother and says, Shut up, Lou. Without saying anything to his younger brother, Sabo simply glares at him. All right, everyone has clothes here. Ace, you'll need to wear a shirt in the desert. As his eye flashed crimson, Naruto told him, there is no arguing about it. For his part, Ace raised his hands in surrender and said, Fine. His voice was laced with annoyance. Sabo, you will need to change your outfit because it is too heavy for the desert. We have a blue outfit for you, so don't worry. He told the blonde before himself, your shoes are fine. Sabo simply nodded his head while Luffy started to take clothes out. Lightweight clothing, including hats and scarves to cover their heads and lightweight jackets to cover their arms as they walk. Here you go. Luffy winked at Sheikah and handed her an outfit, causing her to blush a little. After an hour, great, we're finally ready, said the crew as they completed putting on their desert attire. Luffy frowned as he said, we can't keep the ship here anymore. Vivi said to Luffy and the others, there's a river mouth not too far away. We can sail down it until we reach a point where we can dock and travel to Arumalu, if we can find Koza, the leader of the rebel army. Luffy grinned at Vivi and said, okay, sounds good. As Zoro, Naruto, and Sanji prepared for the impending battles, he gave the order, Nami set sail to the river's mouth. Usopp and Chopper trembled in terror. The search for the river's mouth took approximately an hour. Usopp exclaims, there's the river opening. From the crow nest. Nami was replaced by Sanji, who guided the ship into the opening of the river's mouth. She asks the blonde if, Naruto, do you have our supplies already sealed? From the last scroll he is working on, Naruto looks up. He threw the final scroll into a single pack and said, yeah, I just finished sealing the last scroll. He smiles and says to the ginger, if you want me to, I'll carry the pack. All right, Nami said as she glares at Luffy and his brothers. As those three would eat everything. She hisses out. Naruto just chuckles as he looks away sheepishly as he is the same as the three brothers. She told her, I can't say much. Luffy, Ace, and Sabo's heads shook when Nami said, I know. It's like you're their baby brother from another mother. But Tsunade has adopted you as her own. Tsunade laughed at what Nami had just said. Luffy remarked, niece, we have another brother. Pouts observing Naruto. Inquiring about Naruto's age, he asked, how old are you? Naruto informed him, I'm 16. Luffy pouts as he feels his butt pout, saying, I'm no longer the baby. Tsunade approaches Luffy and pats his head, saying, baby, you will always be my baby. He smiles as he looks up to his mother. With a smile in place of his pout, he said, okay mom. When Naruto saw what Luffy had just done, he started to perspire. Ace and Sabo approached Naruto on foot. Welcome to the family, little brother. We have a dad that shows up whenever. Sabo sees him more. You have seen mom more than us. So, stop calling her Ba-chan as you are going to start calling her mom. Ace said with a sickly sweet grin on his cheek. Naruto smiled as he replied, yeah, sure. As Kurama merely snorted at the antics of the two oldest, he thought, so this is what it feels like having brothers. As he recalled taunting Shukaku, Kurama laughed and said, yeah, that is how elder siblings treat their younger ones. When Naruto leaps from the ship and lands gently on the sandy beach, he is confronted by an odd little creature. He raises an eyebrow, looks up at the ship, and calls out to Luffy, "Hey Luffy. You need to come down and check this out." He addresses his captain and older brother in all but blood, and his tone is respectful and familiar. Luffy rushes over to the ship's side and looks down. He sees the same strange small animals congregated close to Naruto. Curious, he jumps down to join Naruto and asks, "What are those things?" The rest of the crew notices the disturbance and rushes over to investigate what has piqued Luffy and Naruto's curiosity. Vivi comes closer, her eyes enlarging in recognition. "Oh, those are Kung Fu dugongs. If they appear like this, it means they're challenging Luffy and Naruto to a fight," she says, blinking multiple times to confirm that her interpretation of their posture is accurate. She turns to look at Chopper for confirmation, hoping the small physician will reassure her. Ever the action seeker, Zoro chooses Chopper and also leaps from the ship. With a glance down at Chopper in his arms, Zoro asks, "Might as well see what they want, don't you think?" The small reindeer, obviously eager for whatever adventure is in store, nods in agreement. With determined eyes, the Kung Fu dugongs strike a dramatic pose as the crew assembles. Everyone is anticipating how Luffy and Naruto will handle this unforeseen obstacle, and the atmosphere is tense with excitement. The dugong leader takes a step forward, trying to speak while proudly puffing out his chest. Chopper interprets for the group after learning about the creature. Chopper looks between Luffy and Naruto and says, "We challenge both of you to a fight. As you both have power flowing off of you," in a serious tone. Luffy and Naruto look at each other, a mixture of excitement and doubt on their faces. Luffy looks at Naruto and raises an eyebrow, asking, "Are you sure about this?" They both return their focus to the dugongs, eager to see what will happen next. The dugong leader gave a head nod. Chopper said to them, "He is sure about this," while he dangled from Zoro. The others remained aboard the ship, taking care to avoid obstructing the battlefield. After exchanging resolute looks, Luffy and Naruto nodded to one another. They assumed their fighting positions, and the dugongs followed suit, bracing themselves for the upcoming battle. While everyone on both sides prepared for action, there was a brief silence on the beach. The fight broke out in an instant. The battle ended in a mere 10 seconds. While the Kung Fu dugongs lay sprawled out on the sand, battered and unconscious, Luffy and Naruto stood triumphant. The two monsters, members of the notorious four-monster group, left the crew in awe. Or perhaps it was 5 now, nobody could keep track anymore. A tiny smile appeared on the face of the lead dugong as he stood up and nursed his arm. With a small giggle, Chopper translated, "With you two beating us, you are both now our bosses. We are now following you," noticing the pride in the dugong's voice. Luffy and Naruto looked at each other doubtfully, both taken aback and slightly amused by their unexpected elevation. Naruto scratched the back of his head and said, "Well, that's great and all, but we're here to beat a warlord and win a war. But you could do one thing for us." Luffy quickly understood and nodded. He concluded by smiling at Naruto as they both gave the dugongs matching smiles. "You could stay here and watch over our ship until we return, and make sure no one tries to steal it," he said. The head dugong gave a nod of approval. With a huge smile on his face, he said, "We can do that." Luffy and Naruto, and the others nodded in agreement as they slowly got to their feet. With their allegiance now firmly established to their new leaders, the dugong group appeared sincerely willing to assist. When the crew realized they could trust their new allies to protect the ship while they were away, the atmosphere brightened. Luffy said, "Thank you." He looked around the ship at everyone. He rolled his shoulders and stretched slightly in preparation for the task ahead, saying, "Come on. We have a war to stop or win and a warlord to beat." As Ino glared at him, obviously irritated that she was unable to use her chakra at the moment, Naruto approached the side of the ship and offered his hand to assist her in falling. Despite her frustration, her eyes gleamed with mischief as she seemed determined to find some way to tamper with Warlord's mind. The crew's footsteps crunched against the endless expanse of sand as they ventured out into the desert an hour later. As he trudged along, feeling grains work their way between his toes, Naruto complained. He muttered, "Man, I hate desert walking," and shook his foot angrily. "Don't be a baby," Shikamaru said, sighing and lowering her gaze to the clear, burning sky. She was forced to consider her options. She could have spent hours at home watching clouds pass, or she could be here discovering a world she had only ever imagined. Despite the heat and the inconvenience, a tiny smile appeared on her face. Troublesome, she admitted, but she knew in her heart that this journey was worthwhile. A woman with raven black hair and a clean white cowboy hat stood off in the sand dunes, keeping a close eye on the group. She watched from the saddle of a big, patient turtle as Luffy, Naruto, and their companions marched deliberately toward the center of the desert, presumably to face her boss, Mr. Zero. She muttered, "I wonder if they have what it takes to take him down," barely able to be heard over the whispering wind. She gently nudged her turtle to disappear silently back into the shifting dunes, disappearing into the glistening horizon before the others could see her.